Good morning and welcome to City Hall. We're going to have our budget presentation today. I'll ask Councilman Larry McAtee if he'll lead us in the invocation, and ask Councilwoman Meg Salyer if she'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everybody please stand?
Father, we thank you that we can come together as citizens of Oklahoma City, as friends of public servants. Give us the wisdom to work together. We thank you for the protection that you've given so many of us during these storms, and we pray for your grace to be on those who have suffered great loss. And now as we look at the plans for next year, may we come up with suggestions and ideas that will not only glorify you, but meet the needs of all our citizens. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll call the meeting to order. We have a little bit of business to go through this morning. First of all, item 4A is a public hearing that's regarding the budget. Budget was presented just over a month ago.
Doug will touch on that if you...
Okay, sure.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The Municipal Budget Act, state law, requires that we have a public hearing at least 15 days before the budget takes effect and before it's adopted, and that's what we're having officially today. Obviously, citizens can come down and speak to the budget at any time during this process, during the department presentations that we've had or after council, but we have to have an official public hearing, and that's what we're having today. Next week will be the vote to adopt the budget, but we do have several presentations today from departments who will be kind of going through the changes in their budget and their activities. And so this is just kind of one more step as we get closer to finishing up the budget process. Again, next week we'll have adoption. So.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Is there anyone here wishing to speak as part of the public hearing regarding the budget process today? All right, how about a motion then to approve item 4A?
Move the item.
Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 4B is a resolution authorizing our tornado work from FEMA.
Right, as part of the tornado of the May 20th tornado, we anticipate going on private property to do some debris removal. And this is a resolution prepared by Mr. Smith and some of his friends up in the municipal counselor's office to give us the authority to do that.
That is correct. And Richard Smith, City Attorney's Office. I've worked with FEMA and with Lieutenant Barnes to get the documentation necessary for FEMA to assist us with the payment for the debris removal from private property. And by signing this resolution or adopting this resolution, it authorizes the mayor to sign the letter that's necessary to ask FEMA for assistance.
Okay. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously.
Mayor, I do want to acknowledge Frank Barnes in the chambers this morning, and Frank has just done a yeoman's job over the last 3 weeks of coordinating the recovery efforts and just tireless effort put in over the last weeks. Not Frank alone, but certainly he's been leading that cause. I do really, Frank, want to appreciate you and your staff and all the efforts that have been done over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Mayor, I'd like to just continue that thought. Frank was with us last night at the Hillsdale College going through a community meeting to explain how citizens of Oklahoma City can obtain permits and get the procedure to begin rebuilding started. We now have an office at the Moore Norman Technical Center on Southwest 134th and Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's in the Business Development Building. Individuals from Oklahoma City can go there and begin the process of getting permits to allow the city to come on to their property, have debris removed, as well as begin to remove the slab and other items, and then also the rebuilding process. So that phone number is 297-1030 for those who'd like to call first. It's open from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. Frank, again, is heading up that effort and is out there and and also has plans to attend meetings throughout this evening and the rest of the week in various locations to continue to get the word out. And again, thanks to Frank for all of his efforts.
Mayor, Frank may not want me to quote him, but he said that sleep, eating well, and exercise are way overrated. You can live for a long time on donuts and lack of same. So we know you and your whole staff are doing that. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, Larry, then
Yeah,
Ed.
Lieutenant White here. Do we need to try to make similar arrangements for the folks out in far southwestern Oklahoma City with the Friday night situation, or is the disaster not that widespread to warrant that?
I'll never say a disaster's not that bad, but obviously the volume of damage that we had on the May 20th tornado is much more severe. Although there were a number of affected properties on the damage on Friday night, there were no homes that were totally lost, and there were only 29, Frank? 32 homes that had major damage. And so, although it's tragic for those people that had that, it just isn't anywhere near the scale of the other efforts. So we weren't anticipating putting up a satellite office at this time.
So the folks should contact the satellite office that they,
Or downtown.
or downtown?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ed?
Can I ask Lieutenant one question? I just thought there was an article by Bill Crum interviewing yesterday, which I thought was the most just very good advice and a good summary of advice for people what to do. But I wouldn't necessarily blame any citizen at this point for doing any behavior during a tornado, because it seems they're getting different messages. I was listening to the weather report, and there were clearly people were being advised if they were above ground that they should head south. People were told to drive south or move south, and then of course the tornado said if we've got another shot at Moore, why would we pass that up, and took a right-hand turn right towards Moore. What if people went down in drainage ditches, which we've told people that if you're caught outside, head for low-lying ground, and then unfortunately they got caught. Could you summarize some of the things that you talked about with Bill Crum in terms of planning ahead of time?
What I told Mr. Crum was that our advice is that you shelter in place, either in a storm shelter, a safe room, or the lowest level of the home, and that you put as many walls between you and the exterior wall. So we're looking for an interior room, a room that does not have an exterior window or exterior door. What a lot of people aren't aware of is that 95% or 98% of most tornadoes are EF3 or less, and a well-built residential structure will provide survivable protection from that tornado. If you look at Friday's event, the highest rated tornado was an EF3. That was the one in Canadian County. All the others that crossed through Oklahoma City were EF1 or EF0. So sheltering in place would have obviously provided you with adequate protection. If you're going to choose to do some other course of action, you have to do it well in advance of the storm. You can't wait till the tornado warning to say, I'm going to go get in my car and drive away from the tornado. It's too late. So you have to pay attention to the watches and warnings, and when a tornado watch is issued, that's your clue that if you're going to do something other than shelter in place, if you have an alternate site you're going to go to, whether it's a friend's house you shelter at because they have a storm shelter, or you're going to drive north or south away from what you think will be the event, you're going to have to do it well in advance, and that you have to do it when the watch is issued, not the warning. When the warning's issued, it's too late.
Do you think we could use the infrastructure of, we have a pretty robust infrastructure of neighborhood associations. We've got the Neighborhood Alliance that tries to could we use maybe those to help neighborhood by neighborhood, everybody come up with a plan, figure out who has shelters in the neighborhood, and maybe try and work this out ahead of time?
Well, that's certainly something that the Neighborhood Alliance can look at. The issue that you have is that everyone, it's private property, and each property owner has to decide whether they want to do that or not.
But maybe work out ahead of time which property owners would be willing to let people in the neighborhood come.
That should be done at a neighborhood association, neighborhood homeowners association level. That should not be made public to the general public, because you may suddenly find folks in your neighborhood that aren't your neighbors.
Right.
And I know we have many anecdotal stories from people who talk about their neighbors who came over. There's the story of the 20 people in the 8-person storm shelter, or accommodating a large number of folks, but that was their neighbors. And so doing it at that neighborhood level makes sense, but not at a public level where it's out there for everyone to know about.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions then before we recess the council meeting, convene as the Finance Committee? All right, recess the council meeting, convene as the Finance Committee, and we have presentations and discussion for the 2013-14 budget process.
Now we're going to start with Rick Kane from our Public Transportation and Parking Department.
Good morning, and thank you. As I get started this morning, I do want to acknowledge the presence of some of my staff members that are here. Debbie Holtzclaw, who is our parking manager and runs our parking operation. Larry Hopper is here. Larry works in our service development area, helps coordinate some of the planning studies that we've got going on. Michael Scroggins, who is our public information officer and also manages our marketing and our customer service areas. And then the newest addition to our staff, Jason Furbush, who we stole from the budget office. Jason is now our new assistant director in our department. Some housekeeping items. The information for our department begins on page 343 in your budget book. But as I mentioned in previous presentations to you at budget time, some of the numbers that I'm going to be reporting today are not going to match the numbers in your budget book. And that's simply because the budget book focuses on the funding that the city provides for our department. And of course, we get funding from other sources besides the city. And so, particularly when I get to the total budget numbers, you're going to see some differences there. Our business plan is consistent this year with our mission statement, which is to provide services so citizens and visitors to our city can safely and affordably travel and park in a customer-friendly environment. We continue to use the latest survey information that both the city provides, and also we do a number of surveys as COTPA as well to guide the development of our issues and strategies for the department. Again, this last citizen survey in 2012, transit was one of those items that was identified as an area of emphasis. As council, you've certainly done that by identifying as a priority item for you. It was interesting, though, we went back to 2005, which was the first survey year that the city actually did the comprehensive survey, and at that point in time, transit was not even on the list to get into these high, what I'd say, priority areas, which tells us that we've been working very hard to try to increase awareness of public transportation. Obviously, through the support of the city and through our efforts, particularly in our marketing efforts, we've seen that change, and I'm pleased with that. Beginning in 2009, COTPA has been doing every 2 years, we do a very comprehensive survey where we not only talk to our riders, but we also talk to our non-riders and ask them questions about our service. One of the things that we did ask was to our non-riders was what they consider to be important transportation issues. And what was pleasing about the survey that we did in 2011 was the fact that you will see that the items that were identified as being important are very consistent and track very closely to what came out of the citizen survey. Again, road maintenance being a high one, ease of travel, or in our case we called it commute times, also scored well. But I think what's also very important is the fact that we saw a number of individuals, particularly that 55 to 65-year-old baby boomer group, who identified they had a very strong concern for providing mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. We also asked a question about the importance of investing in public transportation. And what we saw over that 2-year period from 9 to 11 was what we feel is a significant shift from those who you might say had a relatively neutral opinion of public transportation, and a shift to where they're now seeing public transportation as being more important. Again, we think this is in part due to a growing awareness of the benefits of public transportation, and we hope as we continue to work in this area and also to demonstrate not only a good job of providing service, but a good job of managing our funds, that we will see support for public transportation grow. And we do have in this year's budget money set aside to conduct another comprehensive survey. We typically do this in the fall, winter time, around October, November time period. So we will have numbers next go around for 2013. I mentioned the fact that some of our non-riders had identified that they thought mobilities for seniors and elderly were very important, and so I wanted to put a slide in here. We do this every year where we talk about some of our programs that are oriented towards seniors and those with disabilities. Oftentimes people focus on our fixed route bus services and don't understand all the other transportation opportunities that are out there. So this year I wanted to just touch on two very quickly. One of them is the Senior Companion Program, which matches able-bodied seniors with those that are more frail. These seniors are trained volunteers. They go to the senior's home and they assist perhaps in preparing meals. They may do some housekeeping for them. Part of it is just companionship and being there and have somebody to talk to. And then also they are there to support other professional services. We transport these senior volunteers via a van, and this is one of our partnership programs that we do with the Area-Wide Aging Agency. The second program that I wanted to mention this morning is the Sheriff Air Taxi Service, and I know many of you are familiar with that. It is a discounted taxi service that makes transportation available 24/7 to individuals across the city, and not only in Oklahoma City, but actually any of the participating municipalities in our region that want to join this program can do so. The way the program works is that we sell coupons for taxi rides, $10 booklets. The citizen purchases the booklets for $6, and then the participating municipality puts the additional $4 in. So typically, the City of Oklahoma City's money comes from CDBG funds, but we do have other participating communities, nearly all actually that touch Oklahoma City participate in this program as well. They do have to provide the additional $4 out of their funds, however they decide to do that, and they do pay a small administrative fee to COTPA for managing the program. I talked about partnerships with AAA, and we're constantly looking for ways to create partnerships. One of the areas of focus this past year has been what we call our Rhodes Scholar program. We've been working with the Oklahoma City Public School Foundation to promote this program, and what it is, it's an opportunity for the schools to provide field trips. They use our bus services, and they travel to educational and entertainment sites like the Art Museum or the Oklahoma History Museum or perhaps the State Capitol or any number of other facilities. The requirement is it has to be on one of our bus routes, and if they make advance reservations, they're able to take these trips for free, which we've discovered is a big deal for the schools because otherwise they have to pay for these services to bring a school bus out to make the trip, and obviously they're operating on tight budgets. And so we've seen a significant increase in working with the foundation this year and seeing schools take advantage of this. Now, it's not just schools. Also, we've done this for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and youth groups of all ages. And again, we encourage this because we feel it's a good way to introduce them to public transportation. And really, since they're riding our routes that are already designed out there, it's really not costing us anything. We've, with garage occupancy at an all-time high, we've talked about our needs to build additional parking. You're well aware of the garage that's being built south of us across the street. It's going to add about 800 spaces to our parking capacity. We are planning to sell our bonds next week. I am pleased to announce that last week we learned that both Moody's and Standard & Poor's gave us a very strong bond rating. And in part, we're certainly appreciative of the fact that the city is helping us support that to get that strong rating, which will then play hopefully favorably into the rates that we have to pay.
We're supporting that with our credit, not with any dollars. I want to be clear on that. We're not. There's not a dollar, but it's a good faith credit of the city that's support that's going out.
Is that a moral obligation?
In addition to meeting the parking needs by building new garages, I think it's also important that we keep a focus on what we would call a state of good repair. In January, we finished a significant structural rehabilitation of the Santa Fe garage. We're now entering a $2.5 million phase where we're going to be redoing essentially all of the retail area that fronts there on the plaza. We're also going to be making some improvements to just the walkways, and there is a courtyard area that's kind of hidden within that garage that we're going to be doing some enhancements, and then there'll be a following phase after that. We would anticipate that this initial $2.5 million renovation should be completed probably in October. We're also working with the new owners of the Century Center Mall. You've seen a lot announced about their plans for that parking garage. We're working with them to coordinate the enhancements to the exterior of the garage. In addition to that program, we're also putting in an additional $2.5 million to do renovations. Those are structural, those are waterproofing, some enhancements to the elevator and lobby areas. Both the work that was done at the Santa Fe garage and what is continuing at the Santa Fe garage, as well as the work that's being done for the Century Center garage, are all being paid out of cash that the parking system currently has.
If we can just stop for a second and reflect back 4 or 5 years ago when the Devitt building was announced, there were actually discussions and concerns that what's that going to do to downtown because of all the vacant office space that will leave behind, and will downtown be able to recover from that? And they're going to build 2,000 additional parking spaces, and we've had conversations with Devin. You know, what's that going to do to our parking system with losing all those parkers and having all those vacancies? And we're at 120% or whatever we are now of our garages. And so it's really interesting how the dynamics of downtown and the fears from 4 or 5 years ago that we were going to have all this vacant space and all this additional parking, and none of that came into fruition. It was all backfilled very well, and downtown continues to grow. I just think it's an interesting dynamic just a few years later.
One item that I have talked about before, and I want to continue to try to make this point, and that is that we do face a major funding challenge as it relates to our bus purchases in the future. I've talked to you before about the fact that whenever you use federal money to buy buses, that the Fed have a requirement, and that is that you need to keep your bus in service for 12 years. Well, given that we will run on average about 50,000 miles a year on a bus, do the math, and that tells you that we've got close to 600,000 miles on our buses by the time that they reach the eligible age to be retired. That puts real stress on the system, and so it's critical from our standpoint to be able to make a timely replacement of buses. And what we have coming up here over the course of the next couple of years is the need to replace 18 fixed route buses, or roughly 40% of our fleet that we put out every day. And we also have to replace nearly 50% of our paratransit vans. So the challenge is we don't have any existing identified funding for that right now. You know, we were very fortunate, and thank you again, Council, in 2007 that we were included in the general obligation bond issue. That allowed us to purchase buses that we replaced in 2009. Then we had the stimulus funds that came along, and that allowed us to replace some buses in 2011. And in fact, we still have 2 more coming in yet this year with stimulus funds. And then we had a carryover of some funds when Governor Fallin was in Washington, and we were able to get an earmark for bus purchase money from both her and Senator Inhofe. And that will actually be allowing us to bring some buses in towards the end of this year. But now we've used up all of our funds. And in the new MAP 21 transportation bill, the challenge there is that they have identified money to be set aside specifically for buses, but they're appropriating those funds based on a formula basis. And that formula basis deals with population and density and ridership. And unfortunately, we don't score very well. So the money that's being set aside is probably going to allow us to buy 2 to maybe 3 buses out of this next appropriation. So the challenge is there over the short term. Without being able to find the funding, then what we're going to have to do is just continue to operate our buses a little longer, which obviously will tend to drive up the cost of maintenance as we keep those older buses that have got a lot of mileage on them out on the road for a longer period of time. We continue to focus on growing our ridership, and we measure that on a per service hour basis. We appreciate the support over the last several years that you have provided and allowing us to do incremental funding increases, which allows us to put more service on the street. Last year, we had our largest amount that we added. And I think the thing that's important for you to remember, though, is as we make these positive steps, when we add service on the street, there is a downward pressure on riders per service hour or revenue hour that we have here from the fact that it often takes time for those routes to mature. So, and again, understand that this is well, in this case, we did an estimate of through April of 13 for you, but generally speaking, when we talk about 18 passengers per hour, that's per bus. That's not just per the entire system, but that is per bus per hour out there on the road. So seeing that line move up, it continues to please us. Again, it is, as we talk about our Nelson Nygaard study, you know, there are certain routes that we will identify that we will keep because we call them lifeline routes. They do pull against this overall ridership, so we will see some routes in our system that perhaps only produce 10 riders per hour, whereas we have others that will produce 26 to 28 per hour. So again, it's a good target measurement for us because it does make allowances for increases and decreases in service, and we don't want to focus solely on the total ridership number. Mr. Couch mentioned this parking demand that we have. There's been a lot said about the demand for parking and satisfying that demand. We're reporting to our board next week that parking occupancy is actually climbing up to almost 114%. Again, we oversell the garage because not everybody shows up every day. You know, the growth or the challenge in a parking system like this is really remaining self-sufficient, though, trying to meet the needs of economic development, which is a good thing in the downtown, but it puts significant pressure on us to manage our parking system effectively to try to sustain that. Our overall operating budget for this coming year shows an increase of roughly about 5.3%. The growth in the transit budget is coming from the additional funding to allow the enhanced bus services. There's $1 million that has been put forward in that. On the parking side, we're seeing an increase in the parking budget, but that comes as a result of the new debt service that we're going to have as a result of selling the bonds to finance the new parking garage. The city continues to be the primary support for public transit, and I don't see that changing. Generally, that number has been floating around 50%. This year, it's closer to 55%, and again, a large part of that is affected the additional funding that has been allotted for public transportation, the additional $1 million. We did work this year at the state level. Number one, we're always working to try to protect the funding we have out there because there's always challenges to maintain what we have. We also worked with leadership to try to establish a long-term funding plan rather than ask for a lot of money in one year. We laid out a relatively aggressive 5-year plan to get us to the point where we feel is the next threshold level where we need to be. We do this not only on the urban level, but we work with our rural transit properties as well to do this. The response we got this year is they want to see us work closer with ODOT, and so we are stepping out to do that and work with the new leadership at ODOT to try to work more in harmony in terms of funding overall transportation. There was a slight increase in the federal funding this year in terms of the authorization level that was there. I think what you always need to be careful and remember, however, is that authorization is not appropriation. And what ended up happening from the appropriation side was they held this year's 2013 funding at 2012 levels. So although you will hear that there was more money authorized, in fact that was true, we're not seeing that money filter down and come back in terms of an appropriation level. So we've got one more year to run on our transportation bill, and then it starts all over again. Typically, Congress has always been running 2 to 2.5 years behind in terms of getting a transportation bill in place. So we are working with our association and already setting out what we feel are our key priorities, identifying some of those things in MAP 21 that we feel need to be changed as we move forward, and again, trying to promote public transportation. One of the big challenges is going to be shoring up the trust fund. You hear a lot about the highway trust fund running out of money. Well, the fact of the matter is the transit trust fund was in slightly better shape, but it also pulls money out of the highway trust fund. So from that standpoint, we are, again, continuing to focus on a long-term solution to try to fund transportation, not only on the highway side, but the public transit side as well. The key to our parking revenue is our monthly parker. Well over 60% of our revenue comes in from those who park daily in our system. What it does do, though, it has put a real challenge to, or given us a challenge from the standpoint of transient parking. When you put so many monthly parkers in your garage, there aren't as many spaces for those who just come downtown to maybe do business for a short period of time and then leave the downtown area. So there is a balance that has to take place. I will say with the additional on-street parking that's come about as a result of Project 180, that has helped us in being able to address some of the transient parking need. And so as we continue to make those 180 improvements and get more meters on the street, that'll continue to assist us in the garage until we can take some pressure off of our garage occupancy levels. Just to quickly highlight some of the budget changes, we are adding a couple of personnel this year. One of them is in the customer relations side to help us deal with customer relation issues related to inquiries, and then also the complaints and commendations that come through. We want to be more responsive in terms of getting back to those who raise issues with the quality of our service. We also are adding someone to our maintenance staff to help us take care of our facilities. They continue to, it seems like it wasn't that long ago when we built the downtown transit center, but it's getting close to 10 years old already. And with all the folks who move through there on a daily basis, it's starting to show its age. And so not only from the capital side of making improvements, but just day-to-day maintenance that's there, we need to keep a focus on that so we have a quality facility. Also, technology enhancements. I've talked in the past about a lot of what we're doing relative to real-time information and automated vehicle location, the benefits from that, adding Wi-Fi on our buses, and certainly the new downtown meters, the electronic meters. They all come with the added operational cost, and so we are making allowances for those costs in our technology enhancements. We're also proposing a fare increase. This was done in part to balance our budget so we did not have to take any service cuts, and also to support increased service on the street and provide a better service for our citizens. So I've mentioned the significant increase is coming from the service enhancement money, the $1 million that was provided for this year. Now, I can't tell you yet exactly how that $1 million is going to be spent because that is closely tied to the Nelson-Nygaard study, and we're going through that process right now. But we are certainly appreciative of that. And I should back up and mention on the fare increase, what we are talking about doing is going from $1.50 to $1.75, so it's a 25-cent increase, and that's on a single ride ticket. We have in the past tried to structure our fare schedule so that we encourage people to buy passes. Passes come at a discount. It was a couple of years ago that we added a one-day pass and a 7-day pass so that you're not required to buy a 30-day or a monthly pass, which some see that as a financial challenge. So we were not going to be adjusting all of our pass prices. We again want to see people continue to move in that direction. It helps in faster boarding, and it's just cleaner for us. So finally, we talked about the Nelson-Nygaard study. You've got the presentation from them. You've had individual briefings on how the routes in your respective wards are being impacted by what they have proposed. We did conduct 2 public meetings on May the 21st at the downtown library. We had, I would say, significant turnout for both of those meetings. In addition to those meetings, we have an existing online survey that continues. Those survey forms can not only be filled out online, but we also have them at the Downtown Transit Center. We've received letters from folks. We've received emails from people. So we're continuing to solicit input from the public on this measure. We are also, staff is still working on certain routes and trying to and recommending modifications that need to be made to those in order to make it work in a way that we think is going to be effective. The target time frame right now is Nelson Nygaard is supposed to come back with their final recommendation to us in mid-June. Regardless of what that recommendation is, as we talk about changing routes and we talk about increasing a fare, we do have a federal process that we do have to go through. It's a fairly comprehensive process. It's what the feds consider an equity process, where we need to go out into the public and address these respective areas of fare increase or route changes. I will say that as opposed to the public meeting that we had, which was focused downtown and in a location where we had several bus routes serving it, our follow-up will be actually out more into the individual neighborhoods or ward areas, where we'll be talking to individuals more specifically about those routes that impact their service area, their ward area. Although we'll certainly be open to talk about any of the changes, we will be reaching out more to those individuals over that period of time. My guesstimate is that regardless of what comes out of the Nelson Nygaard study, that we see some additional service that will be added as a result of the additional funding, that it's likely going to be late this calendar year before we will be initiating any new service, particularly if we have to add personnel to our staff, if we're adding additional not routes, but frequency on routes. It's going to take time to train those individuals, get those individuals hired. So that's kind of a rough timetable for what we see coming out of the Nelson Nygaard work. So in summary, we've seen an increase in our base budget, both monies dedicated to improving our transit service and then also to enhance our parking experience for those who work or visit the downtown area. So with that, Mayor, I conclude.
Question and a comment. Nice tie, Rick.
Thank you.
But do you routinely work with our Public Works Department in deciding the priority of street improvements? You mentioned commute time as one of the measurements you use to measure the effectiveness of your department. But for instance, the Public Works Department comes up with priority projects to go to 4 lanes from a 2-lane road, to put signalization in intersections. Do you work with traffic and planning or our Public Works Department to help them?
Our involvement with the Public Works Department is more focused on accessibility. So as they talk about making road improvements and they add sidewalks to those areas, if they're on a transit route, we work with them from the standpoint that we have brought some federal money to the table to assist in whether it's putting the sidewalk down or maybe it's making a connection from the sidewalk to the curb for accessibility purposes. We also have worked by bringing those, if you think of the little, what we would call street crossing systems down there where you push the button and it talks to you. We have been funding a number of those projects, and as Public Works makes an enhancement to an intersection, if it is an intersection that we deem has significant transit activity, we have been paying for some of those street crossing signals. So it's been more an accessibility issue as opposed to, gee, we'd like you to do road work in a specific area.
And that's not like as much as it is, if this is carrying a lot of commuter traffic and increasing the commute time significantly, do you participate with Public Works in deciding which project to do first?
We have not done that in the past. As we get out of neighborhoods and we start focusing more on arterials, which is what was recommended in the Nelson Nygaard study, I think that'll be significant. So I don't want to say we don't talk, but what we have talked has been more of a focus on the accessibility of our existing routes as opposed to seeking out road enhancements on those roadways that
So the short answer is no.
That's it.
Thank you. Another question on your Santa Fe garage renovation. Are you going to do anything with the elevators?
Yes, we are. That's probably going to come in the next phase. We're going to do some cosmetic things to the elevator lobbies. We did replace the elevator equipment right around 2000. That was when in 1996, we started a renovation project of the garages. We replaced the elevators entirely in around 2000. But now it's time to come back and look at the mechanics of those again. We do keep records of, problem areas that exist there. I can't say that I absolutely know the reason, but that is a garage where we see more vandalism occur and seems to be more directed to elevators. And so our problems in our garages, we see more elevator issues there, but sometimes it's a function of people actually making an effort to vandalize the elevator.
Called rider rage. Anyway, when will the second phase start? Got a timetable?
Of the Santa Fe?
Yes.
It's actually underway right now. They have done the initial demolition phase, and now they're hanging the new steel that's going to be necessary to support the new facade that we're going to have on that lower level. That entire window area across there is all going to be replaced, and so the structural elements of that are going up today.
Have there been tenants identified for that new area?
I'm sorry?
Have there any tenants been identified for that new retail area?
Yeah, we've purposely not filled that area because of the fact we do have a vacancy over there right now. We purposely didn't fill it because of what's going on out there, and we were going to be taking those windows out and doing that replacement, so we definitely have interest in it. We've been fairly successful to keep tenants in there. Again, the one large vacant area that we have right now, though, is by design.
Thank you, John.
Can you talk, we're going to have a final recommendation from Nelson Nygaard in June. Will that final report have the cost of different service improvements? For example, we've identified possibilities of Sunday bus service,
right,
extending it into the evening time, increasing frequency to at least 30 minutes on all routes. My understanding is increasing frequency to at least 30 minutes would be about $2.5 million. And we've talked about different Sunday bus service options. One was $750,000, one's $1.5 million.
1.5, right, for us to run the service.
And the cost to run it until 10:30 at night would be?
That was about $1.1 million, $1.2 million.
Okay, so, and you feel confident with those numbers? You don't expect any change in June?
No, because those numbers were based on what we projected to be our costs for 2014. So from an hourly cost basis, we took their hours and then we extended those based on our cost, and that's how we came up with those numbers. So I feel good about those numbers relative to cost, and I would not expect those to shift dramatically.
So, I don't think there's a scenario where we come up with $2.5 million. So at what point do we decide which one of those service improvements? Do we do just part of the frequency, or when would we make that decision?
Well, I mean, that decision will come after we get their final recommendation. We have a chance to go out and talk to some public a little bit more, because I do want to bring back to you the feedback that we're hearing from the public specifically. One of the things that we're seeing as a result of this early survey, and for those of you who attended the public meetings, there's still some misinformation or misunderstanding in terms of when we talk about certain routes going away, people that's what they hear and they shut it off. And it's not that the entire route is going away. Elements of it are, but we're modifying other routes to cover. So I would anticipate that probably sometime in the late summer, we would be able to come back to you with some kind of a recommendation from a staff perspective. Again, the question is, if you increase frequency, we've been down this road multiple times, and we know when you increase frequency, and Nelson Nygaard will support this, you see ridership gains much faster. To add Sunday service, you're not going to see the ridership gain as fast. I think the challenge on the extending the hours into the evening, and they were talking about basically a 9:30 lineup, which means that bus is coming back to the garage by 10:30. You aren't necessarily getting that person who works until 11 o'clock, and I think that's one of the challenges that when we look at extended hours, how long do we really need to extend them to get the benefit? But that's probably going to generate the least amount of ridership early on, and maybe even long-term, is that group who wants to stay out a little bit later, or those who have what we would call a more traditional second shift job and need to get home. The ridership numbers aren't going to be there, and I think that's a policy decision in part that has to be looked at closely, and how are we going to measure success in this? Are we going to key off of ridership, or are we going to look at it in a different way? And that's what you'll have to consider.
Let me just ask you about as bus shelters as an additional source of revenue. Currently, we have an arrangement where We contract with an advertiser, and we get paid, I think, 5% or $200, whichever is.
5% roughly of gross, or 200, whichever is more, and it tends to be the fixed amount, turns out to be the number that we get. So it's minimal amount, and I think as we've looked at how do other systems operate, bus shelters or bus benches system, it really is a function of who owns the asset is the biggest key. I think those systems that own the bus shelter, own the bus benches, and have made that capital investment, if they are contracting their service, and generally we find that most transit systems do contract the advertising of those, they do get a much higher percentage than what we're seeing. And we find that generally most transit systems own their own assets. Our challenge has been in the past, as we look, how did we get to where we are today? The fact of the matter is, we didn't have a lot of capital money, and our capital money went into supporting other things.
So if $200 is 5%, so they're generating some $4,000 in revenue a year.
14,000 is what we get in a year, yeah.
Okay, but per bus shelter is generating
a couple $100.
But generating $4,000 of revenue for total revenue per shelter. So if we were to invest the capital, let's say we invest the $10,000 for the bus shelter, and then we're able to negotiate something like a 50-50 split, so now we're bringing in $2,000 into COPTA per bus shelter. That seems like a sound business decision. And invest $10,000, get $2,000 back. In 5 years, you've got it paid for, and you have a revenue source of $2,000 per bus shelter. Is that, I mean...
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, there's two things to consider. One is coming up with the upfront money to be able to make that capital investment. And then it does address, if we now own it, then it's a question of who maintains it. And we can do that as part of our contract arrangement. You know, they're going to want a percentage for doing that, or else we take that on. For us to do that means that we would have to hire some additional staff to maintain them. That's pretty much how it balances out.
The $1 million that we spend on the ferry each year, is that federal money, or where?
On
the ferry.
Okay.
Is that federal money, or where?
It's a mix. The city's putting in about $670,000 this year. Then another $400,000 was coming from the feds.
And what kind of rider?
Not quite 400, because we do have revenue from fares that are paid.
And we're considering that as a transit vehicle.
Yes, it is, and I think it's significant to recognize that we struggled on this one. We had to get the Federal Transit Administration to work with us, and we did come to a successful conclusion that the ridership that we have on the ferry service does count as ridership when we calculate our formula calculations. And so, you know, those first couple of years that we were out there, we weren't getting credit for that ridership. We are now getting credit for that. So that does help count towards our ultimate appropriation that comes back.
What kind of ridership do you get on the ferry?
We're averaging, I think, and I'm going to tell you right now off the top of my head, and so I need to go back and double check the numbers, but we're seeing probably about between 10 and 11 passengers per service hour.
Final question.
Now, you know, that's what's happening on the transit side. The other side of that, of course, is the premium service, whether it's a charter or whether it's some of our specialty cruises that we do. We have to maintain a balance so that we demonstrate that the majority of our ridership is a transit function to maintain that transit allowance by the Federal Transit Administration. Our charter service is what really generates the extra fare money for us that we have going into the program.
How do you see things progress? It seems like one area where we're a far outlier is we have no dedicated funding source for transit, and we have no regional transit authority. What will things look like over the next year with the regional transit dialogue and ACOG? I mean, how do you see things playing out and moving towards those?
You know, the mayor chairs that committee, and so, you know, probably has some feelings towards it. From a personal perspective, I think the challenge is going to come back where it ended last time. I think we made tremendous strides in identifying the governance structure. How would we run a regional transit system? And there was a lot of discussion on that subject. The challenge came from is how do you fund a regional system? and the participation that would be necessary, whether it's by cities or counties or districts, however it is that it's set up. I think that's the challenge, is getting everybody to come to the table and then ultimately ante up. And, you know, do I see that happening in the course of the next year? No, I don't. I think it's still significant to make sure that from an organizational or governance perspective, we've got a plan, but the challenge is going to be the funding of that.
Just a couple of questions. One is, I also like your tie.
Thank you.
I think you must have a tie collection that when you're going to be in front of council, you just have a...
I do that. They does get comments once in a
You
while,
go
so I
to
do try to
those,
That was
find
part of
it.
our strategy as we prepared for this budget presentation, is which tie he would be wearing.
It's the execution of the knot that impresses me. The tie is quite ordinary, but that knot is spectacular.
Right. It's great. The second thing I wanted to talk about was how much I appreciate the attitude that your staff has shown with regard to listening to our transit concerns, and especially as it relates to the schools. All the work that's been done, your attendance at all those meetings that we have concerning the schools is just, I personally appreciate that, and I think it's made a difference. I still have some ideas how we could expand that, as you and I have talked about some of them, but I think we're really making great strides, kind of really based on the theory, two theories really. One, the schools can't afford it, and two, if we're going to get people to ride the transit system, we need to start when they're young and give them an exposure to it, and I think both of those, you guys have done a really great job.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, you're certainly welcome, because you just really, you do an outstanding job, and I appreciate it. That one, I just can't let one of these budget sessions pass, though, without bringing up something that I've brought up every budget session since I've been on the council, about the schizophrenia between operating a parking system and a transit system. It seems to me that we talked a lot about improving the parking garage system. The better you make it, the less likely your choice rider is going to go on the transit system. Without that choice rider, the transit system's never going to be much better than it is now. We can continue to put revenue into it, or funds into it, but it's never going to be much better until we start to tap into that choice rider. The choice rider is a person of extreme power. He has a nice job downtown, works 8 to 5, gets off at 5 o'clock, doesn't wash dishes downtown, doesn't shine shoes, doesn't open the doors for people, has a nice job downtown, works in a tall building, very powerful person, relatively, to the guy to the woman that needs the transit system, who's changing the sheets in the hotel room or waiting on you at the cafe. I think we have got to look at that inequity, that inequity of power. We continue to cater to this power side and continue to shortchange this side where people are not powerful. I'd like to know, we're now 29th in the country in size. I'd like to know what the other 28 cities do. Do those cities that are larger than us, all of them have transit systems that are, well, most of them have RTAs of some kind, I know, but do they put the same kind of funding into parking? You know, now maybe they do, because when I'm there, I usually don't have a car or something, but most of the parking that I've done when I'm in a major city has been in privately owned parking. I mean, it's in the hotel. If I'm driving my car, if we rent a car, it's in the hotel. It's not in public parking. And I just wonder, as I have consistently wondered for a long time, how we continue to hold those thoughts in our head at the same time, that you fund parking and you wish you could fund transit. And it just seems to me they're just, I'm not seeing it right, but it just seems to me counterintuitive to try to fund both of them at the same time.
If I can make a couple comments to that. Number one, we are unusual as a transit agency to provide public parking in the way that we do. Typically, if you're a transit agency, the parking that you're provided tends to be for park and ride lots, or it supports your rail operations, and that sort of a situation. I will say that what I saw coming out of, we've done 2 parking summits over the course of these last several months, where we got together with downtown building owners and leasing agents and talked about the parking issue in downtown and the pressure that we have on expanding parking. And it's an education process, but what I'm seeing is some of our larger commercial real estate agents, or those who actually do own buildings downtown, who are recognizing that we can't continue just to build more parking. I mean, we're running out of spaces downtown unless we start tearing buildings down to build parking garages. And so the concept of doing park and ride locations and people getting used to riding shuttles, and maybe the garage that we build is on the periphery of the downtown core, and you start riding the downtown shuttle. That mentality, I'm seeing and hearing more and more of that. Now, at the same breath, you'll also see some people that say that sounds like a good idea, but that doesn't work for the people in my building because. And so, I mean, it is that ongoing education challenge, and sometimes what makes people change is pain. And we run out of space, and we're going to have to find another solution. So, you know, I understand the issue, you know, and that's one reason why we're very careful to make sure our parking system does stand on its own, so that we're not funding, you're having to make the decision of who do I fund in that regards. But it is an ongoing challenge, and it's just like educating people to public transportation. It's part of the mix.
But I think the parking system's always pretty well going to stand on its own.
Well,
Parking is
you know,
has transit ever subsidized parking? I don't think so.
No, and I don't expect the transit ever will subsidize parking. But I will say in the parking side, and being familiar with the Water Trust, you know, it was in the late 80s when downtown suffered that the city did have to step up. The Water Trust had to make a payment, a bond payment.
Right.
And the city was subsidizing the parking operation until the early 2000s. I got involved in parking in about 97, actually 98 on an operational basis. And so I'm not going to say that contributed to the fact that we're now making money, but what a coincidence, you know? But the fact of the matter is, you know, we do now have a history of being able to survive on our own, but there is a time. I mean, you know, it depends on the robust nature of our economic environment.
We've got 4 more departments to hear from. David, do you want to make a final comment? And then
Just
we'll move on.
a quick comment. I think the current arrangement with COPTA, and I'm speaking as a member of the COPTA board, I think we try to look at a fair balance between both transit and parking. You know, there's the possibility that if you had a separate parking committee or trust, they would become even more aggressive in developing greater parking facilities in the downtown area, because that would be their sole focus. So to separate the two, I'm not so sure you would diminish parking, and I'm afraid if we ever gave that impression that we're not concerned with the parking requirements of downtown, that would lead to a general decline in attractiveness for the city from an economic development standpoint. So again, I think the board and staff especially do a very good job of trying to focus on both of those missions. And again, I think if you ask for a separation, you'll see a much more focused, aggressive group of people focusing on parking. And I don't know if you're going to
David,
agree.
excuse me for interrupting, but how could we be more aggressive? How could we be? We're talking millions of dollars we're going to spend over the next 5 or 6 years on parking. How could you be more aggressive than that?
Because, Pete, we're at 113% occupancy.
Of course we are, because we don't charge enough for the deal. We don't charge enough. If the public owned it, if it was privately owned, they would go do what they had to do. And then whatever, I just think you can't, there is no balance. You say we try to balance, you balance the tall building people against the people that have to come downtown to wait tables?
I don't think that ever gets brought up in the
Of
discussion.
course it doesn't.
Or
Of
in the
course it
thinking.
doesn't. Because the reason it doesn't is because those people aren't at the table. They're not at the table. You don't have the alliance down here lobbying you for better transit. You have the alliance down here to lobby you to build one more out of 10 more parking facilities. I'm going to be quiet. The mayor's ready to move on.
We do need to move on.
Yes, no, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Rick, thank you.
Thank you.
Airports next.
Thank you. It's always tough to follow a good tie, but pleased to be with you this morning, Mark Cranenberg, and the portion of my presentation will focus on the airport trust budget as well as that portion of the trust budget that relates to the general fund, which is also details included in the budget book on page 65. I want to start with our mission statement this morning for the airport. It is to provide for the management and operations and development of the city's 3 airports to our tenants and users and the general public so they can have a safe and efficient air transportation system. The Airports Department operates 3 airports for the city of Oklahoma City. Will Rogers World Airport, which is our commercial service airport. It serves approximately 3.6 million passengers each year on 5 major carriers. We also provide facilities for the operation of corporate and general aviation aircraft at Wiley Post Airport and Clarence E. Page Airport. The airports are leased to the Oklahoma City Airport Trust, which operate and manage the facilities. We administer a significant capital improvement program for the construction and maintenance of buildings and various infrastructure, and we also manage approximately 450 leases. Moving to the trust sources of funds, these are total airport charges to our tenants and our users of $57,601,000, and building rents are at the top line, and this is revenue comprised of facility leases for buildings and various hangars. We also have landing fees, which are charged to our passengers and our freighter carriers under signatory agreements. We charge these based on an amount of $2.84 per 1,000 pounds of landed weight, and this is what helps pay for our airfield. Our parking revenue is related to our public parking operation, and it's for our garages and our surface lots. Our concession revenues are derived from the terminal retail concessions, food and beverage concessions, and our rental car concessions. And we have fuel sales also revenue. Now this is 8 cents per gallon we receive on every gallon of aviation fuel that's dispensed by lessees that either have retail privileges or self-fueling privileges at all 3 of our airports. We have other airport charges, which include maintenance reimbursements and leases, and also ground rentals and apron fees. We also have other sources of funds totaling $30,986,000. These are the major categories: oil and gas revenue, which has been remaining constant over the last few years. Our interest on investments continues to be low because yields are low, and revenues from passenger facility charges supplements funding for the airport's capital program on a project-specific basis. We also will receive revenue this next year from customer facility charges, which supports the airport's rental car program, and each year we get substantial federal and state participation in the form of grants or reimbursable agreements for either equipment or airfield projects. We're also including carryover of $13,042,000. Carryover is the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center escrow account and prior year revenues to support the airport's capital program. And revenue bond proceeds are projected to be $14,920,000. These are bond proceeds we intend to spend on construction this next year. So the carryover, bond proceeds, and projected revenues of $88,587,000 will comprise the trust budget of $116,549,000. Moving to the uses of funds, Our other services and fees, $9,566,000, supports our major contracts for our parking management operation, janitorial services contract, aircraft rescue and firefighting, and the supplemental security contract. Commodities represents various materials and supplies. Our debt requirements are the debt that we're paying on previous bond issuances, primarily for the terminal renovation done a few years ago, and the most recent 5-story parking garage. We also have the transfer to the airport's cash fund, which represents the airport employee salaries, benefits, and other miscellaneous services and supplies, so total operating expenditures of $49,019,000. We also have reserves of $2,016,000. These are funds that are going to be budgeted in 2014 for future capital. And then this year, we're projecting an extensive capital program of $65,514,000, which balances the budget. Our first issue to discuss with you this morning has several areas that can impact resources for future airport operations and capital expenditures. Several airline-related categories can be affected by passenger growth, whether the passenger counts are either an uptick or a downturn, such as what we had in the recession and after 9/11. And of course, passenger growth, when it's going good, can put pressure on your facility, and that's what we're seeing a little bit of today. We also have long-term property leases. Sometimes they're 20-year leases, and some of these leases have facility rentals and also ground rents, which are below market value. And then there's always the challenge of having continuous increases in the cost of providing services. If we don't handle these effectively, we could have a decrease in the quality of service and also resulting in deferred maintenance and a lacking funding for projects. We want to continue to stabilize airport revenue, and some of the things we'll be doing is by 2016, all new and renewed leases will be at market rate. For market rate for aviation uses, we benchmark other airports, and for non-aviation uses, we use appraisals. By 2016, all new and renewed leases that will have cost recovery rates sufficient to pay back the airport trust for any funded infrastructure that the airport might provide to facilitate development. And then also we want to have a goal of maintaining our food, beverage, and retail concession growth of at least 2% a year. Our second issue deals with areas that are not really within our control, but we have to be reactive to. The changing number of aircraft takeoffs and landings at Will Rogers. This is obviously related to passenger boardings and what's going on in the airline industry. And for our general aviation airports, it's mainly related to how good is the economy going. That also can affect just general aviation business activity. And then we always have increasing safety and security and environmental requirements, which lots of times come to us in the form of unfunded mandates. And if we don't manage those, we can have an impact on staffing, workload, and performance, and also funding requirements for future capital improvements, long-term planning, and ultimately customer satisfaction. We want to improve the airport environment by the traveling public. By 2019, the airport will complete the implementation plan that was on the recommendations addressed in the parking study. Some of the things we'll be doing going forward is doing a signage study this next year to improve wayfinding from the airport road to and from the terminal. We'll also be looking at signage inside the terminal and the parking garages itself. One of the recommendations was also to get the rental cars out of the first floor of the 2-story parking garage and do something with that space. And of course, we're addressing that. I'll mention that in a moment. And then also the recommendations were, once that happens, to look at parking amenities for the first floor of the 2 stories, such as preferred parking or valet parking. By 2015, we will construct a facility to meet our rental car demand. By 2015, we also will have a design for certain terminal improvements that need to be done. For instance, in our tunnel, we have issues with our elevators and escalators, particularly at Station 2. We also need a terminal generator, which will keep the airport fully functional whenever we have power outages such as we had last Friday night. And we're also looking at evaluating our security checkpoints because of passenger growth and because of the facility demands to make sure that we can move efficiently through the security checkpoints. By 2019, we want to do an update to the terminal expansion plan. We have 3 vacant gates right now, and we want to always be leaning forward with regard to air service. So at some point, you have to make a business case or analyze your situation. Do we need to move forward and design something to at least do a phased expansion so that we can have more gates for the future? The 20-year growth of Oklahoma City has been phenomenal, and also that results in a growing need for air service. We recognize that, and we've done a good job at that over the last few years, but if we don't keep our eye on the ball, it could result in missed revenues for the airport trust. It could result in missed economic development, tourism, and convention business opportunities. We're very excited about the MAPS 3 Convention Center because a byproduct of that will be more rental cars and also hopefully more nonstops. And ultimately, the additional demand for air service, if not met, can result in decreased customer satisfaction. I mentioned we've done a good job with air service over the years and will continue to do so. One of the things we benchmark ourselves against other airports is we limit the growth of our airport cost to the airlines per boarding passenger to no more than 5% a year. And in the last couple of years, we have actually been stagnant, so we haven't raised it at all. We want to continue to accomplish a minimum of 3 marketing presentations each year. And in fact, this morning we have staff that will be leaving for the Jumpstart Air Service Conference to have communications with 7 airlines to continue to talk about Oklahoma City and the airport. We also want to achieve a 2% or greater increase in boarding passengers each year. That's a goal that we have. Our fourth issue is that all of our airports have a significant amount of land. We're fortunate to that, but sometimes we have vacant facilities which cost us money and we need to make them more lease ready. And we always have a cost of maintaining our existing infrastructure. Will Rogers World Airport being quite massive, over 8,100 acres, it's one of the largest landmass airports in the country. So if we don't do these, then it could prevent the airport trust from generating sustainable revenue sources to fund our operations and capital going forward, and we're already incurring additional costs to maintain vacant facilities. It's better to have people in them. This also will prevent the city from receiving the benefits of economic development. So to help us develop our airport and continue our infrastructure, by 2015, Portland Avenue will be relocated as identified in the Land Use Development Plan. Also by 2015, the number of parking spaces available will increase by 5%. This is directly related to the rental cars moving out of the first floor of the 2-story into the new facility. And by 2016, we hope to develop 30% of the acres on the east side of Will Rogers, now known as Lariat Landing. And a new measure for us is to have a plan in place to monitor the aging infrastructure and identify funding sources for replacement and repair. Those will be done through inspection reports. Moving to the lines of business for the airport, administrative line of business is to provide leadership and support and information to the department so it can achieve its strategic and operational results. Our programs are business services, executive leadership, and public information and marketing. Air service is always a top priority for us. I want to talk about just a few of the things that have happened this year. United Airlines announced nonstop service to Cleveland, Ohio. We were glad to get that back. Continental had that for a couple of years ago, and then they pulled that back immediately after they started it when the recession occurred. Southwest Airlines also did several months of seasonal nonstop service to Orlando. That seems to come and go, but that is a significant city for us. And also Southwest, through their new merger affiliate AirTran, announced that they would begin service to Atlanta in October. We want to continue our efforts to secure nonstops to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. And as you probably know, we've been sponsored by two airlines in the last couple of years. We want to continue to take advantage of that and work with any airline. We're the largest market outside of Washington, D.C., within the 1,250-mile perimeter that does not have service. We also are very focused on the New York area. Primarily, we're looking at opportunities like LaGuardia Airport, and we also have for a long time been trying to get airlines to get us service to the Pacific Northwest. Just wanted to give you an idea of how the boarding passengers have increased since the recession in fiscal year 2011. Our boarding passengers were 1,740,000, and we're projecting that to go well above 1,840,000 next year. I mentioned our cost per enplaned passenger, which is a big benchmark for airlines. Whenever we talk to them about operating at the airport, they all believe that the airport is very much a low-cost airport. Our cost per enplaned passenger to the airlines is $5.47. This is just a representative survey that was done over the years, and you can see that usually they trend more than $7. Moving to the commercial aviation line of business, we have 3 programs: airfield operations and runways and taxiways and safety, security, and inspections. One of our key measures at Will Rogers is the percentage of airport certification categories that don't have any corrective actions. Each year, the FAA inspects Will Rogers. We have to pass that FAA Part 139 inspection in order for air carriers to continue to operate. We always strive to have a target of 100%, and this last time we had 2 write-ups that took us to 85%, but those deficiencies were corrected before the inspection was complete, but we still knock them down. The percentage of days with 0 security incidents, 97%, and we're right now tracking at 93%. In the general aviation line of business, we have 2 programs for operations and grounds. We have a similar measure as we do at Will Rogers for inspection items with 0 findings. The State Aeronautics Commission is doing the inspection for general aviation airports on behalf of the FAA. We had 1 inspection this last year so far, Clarence E. Page Airport, and it resulted in 81%. Any deficiencies on that inspection, most of them are being corrected now in an airfield project that is being done at this time. We also track the percentage of days that the airport has a runway closed, and our target is 8%. We're doing better at our general aviation airports at 4%. Sometimes that's related directly to runway projects for either maintenance or rehabilitation. In the maintenance line of business, there are 4 programs: building maintenance, equipment maintenance, fuels, and grounds. One of our key measures is the percentage of airport operating hours where we have major systems functioning. Our target is 95%. We're actually doing a little bit better than that right now at 96%. And this is not just heating and air, it's also the passenger loading bridges, the baggage systems, the elevators, the escalators, the moving walkways, all of these things we track. We also track the percentage of vehicles and equipment that is available for use. 97% is our target, and we're at 92% today. In the property management and development line of business, there are 3 programs: architectural, engineering, and planning, construction, and facility and lease administration. One key measure that we're especially proud of the last couple of years is we've been able to hold down the construction cost as a result of any change orders and amendments. Our target is 5%, and we've been at 3% for the last couple of years. A couple of projects I want to just give you an update on this morning. One is the consolidated rental car facility, which is currently in design. This is approximately a $32 million facility just for the construction. We anticipate spending approximately $14,920,000 this next year. To remind you, it will be located across from the Southwest Airlines Reservation Center on South Meridian. It's only about a 3 or 4 minute bus ride between the terminal and the new facility, which will be a bump and go operation. The Airport Trust does have bus bids out for 8 CNG low floor buses for the public. And we are in final negotiations with the 9 rental car companies which will be operating in the facility. We have to have an agreement, and very soon we'll be going out for intent for resolutions to the trust and council to issue bonds for the facility. Also, this facility is programmed to be open by the first calendar quarter of 2015. I also wanted to mention the realignment of Portland Avenue. I talked about it earlier. We're budgeting $6,216,000 this next year. The bids have come in on this project, and after utility relocations, which will happen over the next few months, towards the end of this year, construction will begin on the first phase, or the south portion, which will be from Southwest 104th Street north to 1,900 feet south of Southwest 74th Street. The Airport Trust is contributing $388,000 towards this first portion. The majority of this is being funded by the GEO bonds of 2007 approved. Later this year, we anticipate the Airport Trust will hold the second contract, and we will go out for bid for the north portion that will take it to Southwest 54th Street. This is our lines of business for the airport that we've talked about with its representative budget numbers. For the total budget for the cash fund, $17,721,726, and a total of proposed 118 positions. We are asking for 4 positions in our budget this next year. We're asking for an assistant municipal counselor 2 position to deal with the extra workload and the complexity of the work that's happened over the last few years. Every contract, every lease, every agreement, all of the construction projects has to be overseen for legal review by an attorney. Many times we have to get into negotiations, even with airlines and rental cars, on insurance and hazardous issues in the lease with contaminants. And so there's just a lot of work. This new position will mainly handle the construction side of the trust operation. In the next 5 years, we're anticipating $259 million of construction projects for the 3 airports in Mike Monroney. We're also asking for an administrative coordinator to help in our public information and marketing operation, and this is because we just have so much aspect to the public. Everything that is happening at the airport, whether it's a construction project, all those social media that we're active on now, all of these things, we're asking for assistance so that we can better be more effective to the public. Finally, aviation systems technician for our fuel storage facility. We only have 4 people in this section right now for maintenance, and we're expending over $25,000 in overtime each year. Also, supervisors are filling in for overtime, and there are several projects that we can't do because there's only 1 person on duty. And then finally, a system support specialist, 1 position to help with the growing IT needs for airport proprietary systems at the airport. And that concludes the budget presentation, Mayor.
Just a quick question. On your operations and on your budget, has the closing of the 2 airports, downtown Air Park and Remington, impacted your operation?
No, sir.
Good. Thank you.
Meg?
Mayor, I did just have a quick, and it's a specific comment. I know that on Friday night, everybody was really happy to have the tunnel in place, and thank you for your great efforts in making sure everybody out there at the airport was safe, because that was a scary couple of hours.
That's exactly how long we were down there, 2 hours.
The tunnel, however, does not present a really positive customer experience in line with the rest of the airport facility, which is outstanding. You mentioned it. I didn't get a feel for whether it was part of your capital plan this year to
It is part of the trust plan. We brought that up in the trust budget last month, and we are looking at various concepts to enhance that tunnel. It is very long, all the way from the new Station 6 and the new 5-story. And so we're looking at options, and we'll be bringing that to the airport trust soon.
It needs some physical work. It's got some smell issues. You know, there are a whole series of things that I think could really bring it in line with what the rest of the facility is like. So.
We're also looking at better signage in there, too,
Great.
to the rental car companies.
Ed?
Pardon me? Rehabilitated moving sidewalks, yes.
The amount of revenue over total operating expenditures is about $67 million. You're spending $67 million on capital. Is that on an annual? I mean, is that?
On debt service.
On what?
And debt service.
And debt service.
Yes.
How much of that? So it's capital and debt service. How much is debt service? How much is capital?
The debt service is about $20 million, I think, is what we're proposing on debt service for this next year. Is that right, Kim? Yes.
So it's about $45 million a year.
Well, the capital outlay is actually going to be $65,500,000, and we have debt service that's also related to our expenditures too.
Well, one thing I was struck by, and this I guess goes to what Pete was getting at before, is making investments that seem to compete against public transit. You indicated that you were excited about the convention center because that would increase your rental car business.
Right.
I'm wondering, if we're the 29th largest city now, of the 28 cities ahead of us, how many offer no public transit to their airport? How many only give their customers the option of getting a taxi or getting a rental car? And I'm wondering, you know, if we're spending $65 million a year on capital improvements, we're investing in a bus service, but the bus service only goes between the airport and the rental car facility. I mean, have we ever looked at the possibility of public transit from the airport to downtown, for example? I mean, if we're already buying buses, we're hiring the labor to run the buses, is it conceivable to extend those buses from the airport to downtown?
Actually, many years ago, there was a route. It did not sustain itself, and I think transit did have one, but I don't know how long they had it. But we would be happy to have any discussions on you know, bringing that back. But yes, most of our ground transportation right now is from either public shuttles or taxis to downtown, and it's about a 15-minute or 20-minute ride.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Thanks, Mark.
Next up is Public Works and Eric Winger. As Eric's coming up, Public Works was also a department that spent a lot of time over the last 2 or 3 weeks on recovery efforts. I think Eric put in personally, I know a lot of long hours. But I do want to highlight JC. JC's daughter was married on Friday night, and after the wedding, he had to go down to the river to operate the dam gates because of the fact that the power outage had messed up the communications. We got backup generators, but they weren't communicating because of the severe power outage that we had, and so backup generaters had to be manually restarted and the control set, and JC did that after his daughter's wedding on Friday night. So that's a little bit beyond the call, but thank you, JC, for your efforts over the weekend. And he was also, I think, out there at 4 o'clock this morning. So,
Your Honor, may I ask the city manager a general question? How many additional positions do we have in our budget this year, not counting the public safety?
in the general fund, the only new positions are the 40 positions that are the new police officers. In the non-general fund departments, there were 4 in airports, and there were, I don't remember, we'll find out in a minute here. I don't remember the number in water. Debbie, how many new positions in water this year? How many new positions in water? 10. Okay, 10 in water. So there's 14.
The 4 positions that Mark talked about were paid for by the airport trust.
Yes.
How about the 2 positions that COPTA talked about, additional positions? Is that general fund expense, or does that come out of COPTA money?
Paid for the other rate increase, and they're not general fund positions or capital positions, right? Okay, so there's a new position there, but there were other cuts in the city, so there's still the general fund. The net number of the general fund was 0 outside of the 40 new police positions.
Thank you.
Okay. So there were some adds and subtractions, but the net number was 0.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to present the Public Works budget this year for this upcoming year. I've got several staff. Of course, we've already recognized JC, but I've also got my Assistant Director, Paul Bronson, here. Sherry Turner, who couldn't be with us today. Obviously, those 2 very instrumental in helping us get our budget presentation together, and then a lot of supporting staff as well. So many appreciations for those. As we look and jump right into this, our mission statement for Public Works is to provide infrastructure construction and maintenance, private construction, review and inspection. That would be plan reviews, emergency first response services, which are some things we've been very busy the last few weeks, and then again, to make sure that the public can live in a safe environment. And so we obviously uphold that mission statement strongly in Public Works, and something that we look forward to in this coming year. Our department is comprised of 7 major divisions, and as you look at these, you'll see administration at the top. You'll see engineering, field services, streets, traffic drainage maintenance, traffic management, the Oklahoma River, and stormwater quality. When we look at the city as a cross-section, I know we're very familiar with these figures, but over 620 square miles, nearly 8,200 lane miles of streets. We actually have over 70,000 traffic control signs in our inventory, 733 signalized intersections, and 50 miles of drainage channel. And again, the functions of each of these divisions help support our city infrastructure. This is a summary of our budget. I've included last year's budget as well as a comparison. You'll see the different divisions. You'll see the total number of positions in those. You'll see that there is a net increase of 2, and I'll mention those here in just a moment. Last year's budget was approved with amendment at $53.9 million. You'll see this year's proposed budget is $45.5. There's about an $8 million difference in the budget, and the reason for that is last year, as you may recall, as a part of the budget amendment, the $8 million general fund resurfacing money was added to Public Works. That hasn't yet occurred this year, and so if you're wondering, I would like to take credit for a much reduced budget, but actually it was from the amendment from last year. So very similar budget as last year, very similar positions as last year. Major budget changes. We've got several positions. There's actually a net gain of 2 positions to Public Works. There's 2 positions, utility coordinator for the GO bond program, and a public information and marketing manager that are new positions this year. When we've discussed at various council meetings, obviously the utility coordination, the utility issues that we continue to experience on construction projects has become a major issue for Public Works. The anticipation of this position being approved is going to allow us to work very closely on a one-to-one relationship with our utility companies. One of the challenges that I think that we find is that as we have multiple project managers working with the utility, they sometimes get confused as to what project might be a priority. Our goal is to have one person that is that central point of contact for all utility companies for all of the projects that Public Works and possibly that the city may be implementing in the upcoming year. And so that is that first position. The second is Public Information and Marketing Manager. We're doing a lot more community meetings. We're going out more into the neighborhoods. We have a host of projects, and what we want to do is make sure that we're represented well, that we've got consistency in our delivery, that we're using high-end PowerPoint presentations and a wealth of information when we go out into the public and represent ourselves. The middle two positions that you see here, Engineering Project Manager and Financial Specialist, those are two existing positions that we have. They've been approved. Annually, we're asking to actually just make those full-time positions. This supports Project 180 and other projects that we have throughout the year. When we look at the budget, this is just a breakdown for your information to kind of see how that breaks down by division. I showed the figures on the previous slide. You'll see that our largest budget is towards streets, traffic, drainage maintenance. Obviously, streets is priority one. When we look at the citizen survey, you'll see 47% towards streets. If you look at administration and engineering, if you compile both of those, that is about 30% of our operations. Administration may seem like a large number, but remembering in the budget process, it's a part of a general fund department. We support through our budget other various city departments. So a portion of that is for city clerk office, city manager's office, other offices like the municipal councilor's offices. We also use other general fund departments as a part of our overall budget. I'm going to go through quickly our divisions and what they're predominantly responsible for. The first is engineering, project management, support, and technical review. Their budget for this upcoming year, proposed budget, is $5.4 million, 55 positions. This is the division that manages our GEO-bond programs, our non-bond CIP programs, annual contracts, and right-of-way acquisition. So this is a host of services that is provided under engineering. When we look at types of projects on the GEO-bond program, you'll see that we do things like residential resurfacing. This is an example on the top, Southwest 44th to 51st, Penn to Blackwelder. On the bottom, street widenings like on Southwest 29th, Meridian to MacArthur. We do other projects like street widenings on Wilshire, drainage improvements like you see here in the lower right at Northwest 112th and Miller Avenue. There's new bridges that are included as a part of the bond as well. This is the new Northeast 63rd east of Bryant Avenue. We also have capital projects like the Lincoln Park Golf Clubhouse. The groundbreaking on that was just recently held in the last month. We also have the new Southern Oaks Library at Southwest 69th and Walker that recently reopened as well. The Oklahoma City Police Headquarters, the Oklahoma City Courts Complex are two other bond projects that are being managed by Public Works. As you know, most of these projects are in design phases. The Police Headquarters is expected to bid here in the next few months, the Courts Complex approximately in about a year. The Oklahoma City Police Southwest Briefing Station at 55 South Portland also underway, and then the Fire Station number 26 on 119th and Rockwell is also under construction. So again, from an engineering perspective, there is a lot of roads, bridge, and drainage, but there's also a lot of building projects that the division is responsible for. Looking at the canal extension, this is a project that is expected to finish here in about the next month. These are a couple of the updated photos from that project. And we do have a couple of LFR measures that we use to help track that division. One of the first is the dollar value of GEO bond projects awarded. And you'll see here the target for this year was $69.7 million. We are projecting a $69.1 million goal this year being achieved, but for next year we're looking at the $70 million mark, and this would be GEO bond dollars under contract. Chesapeake Energy Arena is one of those projects that's in our CIP program, so a non-bond type project, and of course hopefully everybody's had an opportunity either through basketball or through concerts to take advantage of some of the new facilities that are there. This was about a $31 million expansion on this Phase C. This is one of the interior renderings of that in the new southwest lobby. When we look at the project management program, there's a couple of LFR measures that I'll bring to your attention. We have found, of course, that budget, scope, and schedule control most projects. And one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we manage our change orders more effectively. Goal, 75% of construction contracts not exceeding 7% in changes following the award of contract. Call your attention to last year's actual, it was only 36%. It was the first year that we actually put this goal into place. We actually made improvement this year at 46%. And so we're working with contracting. We're trying to work more diligently with contractors to hold costs down, to hold changes down. we're still going to maintain that goal of 75%. So we feel that that 10 percentage point increase was very good last year, and we're going to strive next year for even more. The other goal is 75% of projects achieving a final acceptance within 90 days of a final inspection. And again, if you look at our actuals from last year, 43%. If you look at our totals this year, it looks like about 50%. Again, significant gains. We're still not quite to the 75% that we'd like to be at, but that's what we're going to set as next year, and we'll shoot for continued improvement. One of the projects in the CIP program that's probably most familiar to us is Project 180, and this is a map of the downtown area that we're most familiar with. The areas in blue are the completed projects. Package 5 is just now wrapping up. The areas that are in brown and yellow are those new packages 6 and 7, which we anticipate beginning, the design is nearly complete and beginning construction later this summer. Just a couple of the photos of that completed work, Main Street and Lee at the top, and then of course the recently completed Bicentennial Park on the lower right. Field Services is the next division. This is the division that assists in construction inspections, quality control, and also surveying. Budget of about $4 million with 49 positions. Utility cut repairs, daily infrastructure inspections are their two predominant tasks, but we do also a host of surveying. On the construction inspection program, the leading results measure that's most appropriate is the 80% of utility cut repairs within 30 calendar days or less upon receipt. You'll see last year we struggled. We had a number of water main breaks last year, made it very difficult for us to get those utility cut repairs completed, 36%. Year to date this year is at 69, so we're doing much better. Currently, as I looked at the goals, we're at 23 days completing tasks of utility cut repairs, so much improved. Last year we were running about 35 days, so we were just outside that goal. 80% is what we'll strive for next year. On the Oklahoma River corridor, dams and the SCADA system, and of course river maintenance, we have a series of boats. We've got staff at a budget of $1.5 million, about 5 staff that help maintain the Oklahoma River. This is one of those boats in the debris removal process. Obviously, with the significant number of storms and the debris that's in the river, this is going to be a significant activity for us in the weeks to come. When we talk about debris totals, we removed over 135 tons of debris in the 11-12 year. Year to date, and it's obviously going to grow, but the 12-13 year, we were already at 90 tons, but I would imagine that the storms and the removals that we'll have for the rest of this month will significantly grow. But the uniqueness of the machines, as you can see, especially in the lower right, it's a machine that actually has a conveyor belt. It actually can open up doors and retract that debris out of the river so that they can then get it into a truck and haul it off for disposal. Stormwater quality is our next division. Permitting and public outreach, environmental water quality, and household hazardous waste. Obviously, we've got a couple of key positions, 27 positions at $3.2 million. Watershed characterizations and stormwater sampling are also obviously very important. The water quality of the Oklahoma River in our channels and drainage ways. Wayne Drop, who you see at the top of the photo, we do a huge community outreach campaign. We actually were at 11 schools last year and 3 events as we also promote environmental friendly goals of the city of Oklahoma City. And so a host of Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and schools as a part of that program. This next slide is the household hazardous waste facility that's on South Portland. This is at 15th and Portland. We do 2 special waste collections a year to make sure that we try to get those household hazardous waste out of our regular waste stream. One of our most recent events, in 2012, we had about 8,400 participants, over 645,000 pounds of waste collected. We also have MOUs, Memorandums of Understanding, with Edmond, the City of the Village, Yukon, and Shawnee that also support the household hazardous waste facility. Our last event was here on April 27th at the fairgrounds. 83,000 pounds, that's about 41 tons of material collected. Also included computers, tires, ammunition, medication, paint. We served about 700 residents at that one event. And so, again, a lot of material that would otherwise go to the landfill we're able to collect, and in some cases, reuse. And for those that don't know about household hazardous waste facility, if you are a resident or a city employee, you can drop off your waste, but there's actually a storefront of unused materials, everything from pool chemicals to pesticides to paints that you actually have free access to as a resident. So you can drop off and give us your waste and actually take some things that you might find useful at your home. Streets, traffic, and drainage. This is our largest division. Obviously, streets, traffic operations, drainage, and graffiti removal. $21.4 million budget, 222 positions. predominantly crew positions. These are the men and the women that you see on the street that are filling potholes, taking care of emergency response that you've experienced over the past couple of weeks. One of the strategic results, of course, and something that we really work very hard on, is the quality of our city streets. We set a goal to make sure that we at least were at the national average of 37% in 2011. You'll see last year was 42%. This year's citizen survey is at 38%. Our goal is 50%. And we're fully committed to make sure that we provide quality streets for Oklahoma City residents. We've got a number of projects through the bond issue. Nearly $500 million of the $800 million in the 2007 bond issue is dedicated towards streets. We're very diligent in getting that work out, and so as you continue to see us deploy bond projects, as you continue to see us do county partnerships, as we continue to work with ACOG on a number of street projects, you can expect that again in 13-14. On pothole patching, base repair, crack seal, these are some of the tasks that street drainage maintenance do, microsurfacing. Strategic result, complete 80% of pothole repairs within 3 working days. We are at that goal now. We're at 81% this year, and so we're doing very well on pothole repairs. It's a high number. We currently this year have already repaired 58,000 potholes, but that number is down from last year. I think last year I reported a number that was in the 70,000 range. So one of the things that I might mention is I do believe the quality of the streets is starting to come up. Fewer potholes means that there's fewer failures, and so again, we'll continue to monitor that very, very closely. These are base repair crews that are out. When we do see a number of potholes start to collect on a city street and it becomes a pothole on top of a pothole type repair, you will actually see street crews cut those damaged sections out and replace them with full new paving sections, and that's what's going on here. We also still strive to do between 80 and 100 miles of micro surfacing a year, and these are the new micro machines that we engaged last year. They're continuous pavers. One of the early complaints that we had with our early micro program is we created a series of seams in the street, and so as you drove down that street, you'd feel those little bumps. What you see here is an operation where the paver that's at the right side of this video never stops. The machines that actually deliver the material continually supply paver with asphalt. They continue to supply it with water, and so the seams are minimized. And so we've increased our ability to do this at a much more rapid rate. We've also delivered a better quality road surface in the end. We're just now ramping up for this season. As the weather starts to calm down, you'll see the microsurfacer out on city streets here soon. Traffic management, traffic engineering, data collection, transportation services, a budget of $1.5 million, 14 positions. When we look at traffic management, everything from plan reviews, counting traffic, managing different intersections and types of improvements are all included. This is the ITS implementation. This is the intelligent traffic systems. Again, 18 corridors to help commuter traffic be more efficient. About 750 intersections. We've completed about half of those. Last year, as you recall, we expanded that program to now extend ITS to all 700 plus signalized intersections, and so that'll be underway over the next couple of years. And that's going to conclude my budget for this year. So again, we appreciate your continued support of the department, and with that, I can answer any questions that you may have.
Your Honor?
Yes, Pat.
On the additional position, public information and marketing manager listed here, one of the issues I've run across in my ward, and it's due to all the construction you all have provided, is what I call answer shopping. They'll keep calling your department till they find out somebody who will give them a good answer. That becomes gospel in their minds. Will this public information person be sort of a central point for our citizens to get information on the completion of projects?
That is one of the concepts that we have for the position, yes, is that that'll help manage a lot of the citizen calls that we take either through council support, through our department directly, and even through the mayor's office. As most of you know, we field a number of calls from concerned citizens in construction. We would like to make sure that the answers are consistent, and yes, this position would help support that function.
And what kind of marketing will that person do?
You know, one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing proactively is making sure that, maybe I should call it more branding, that we make sure that we're using the city seal appropriately on our presentations, that we're not using graphics and things that may not be appropriate for some of our city presentations. And so on the marketing side, it's really more of just encouraging and making sure that we're following up with the city's brand, the city seal, the city's message, and of course the department mission.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
David?
Your Honor, just a quick compliment to Eric and his staff. You know, the past 2 weeks, both the police and fire department said they could not have done their job without the support of Eric's Public Works Department. You know, they go in there and clean out or clear out the debris from the streets to allow the police and fire to go into those impacted areas. And the three departments work so well together, along with Frank's emergency response group. And everybody just had plenty of compliments for Eric's and his staff.
Thank you very much. I'll share that with staff.
I have a question, Eric. We had some power outages, obviously, Friday night that impacted street traffic signals. Sometimes I see them go to flashing red. What happens when a light that was working goes to a flashing red? Is that a power outage? Or?
It's usually a power spike or an outage that has reset the computer. In a lot of cases, we then need to just send personnel out to verify that everything's okay and then reset and put it back into normal operation. Right now, what we have is we still have a number of intersections in South Oklahoma City that don't have power yet. So they're not even flashing red. So what you'll find in those intersections is a four-way stop sign. Once the power comes on and we note the flashing red, we then will send crews out to remove the stops and reset the controllers.
So the flashing red is temporary?
It is.
Just a few hours in general?
We would hope. Obviously, there's a number of them right now. It could be a day at the moment, but yes, we're trying to address them the same day that we notice the power is restored.
Okay. Pete? All right.
Just an update on the power. Over the weekend, the peak for OG&E was, I think, about 95,000 customers out in the metro area, and as of this morning, it's down to about 6,000. So there's still people without power, but that's just not Oklahoma City, that's the entire metro area, but they're knocking it down.
Okay.
Thank you,
Eric.
And Marcia Slaughter is now joining us to talk about utilities.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's an honor to be here and to represent the Utilities Department. With me today are Debbie Reagan, Brett Weingart, Assistant Director, Stephanie Tagg, and Vanessa Aguilar, who actually put the budget together for us, working with the divisions. Today I'll talk to you about our strategic plan, what kinds of goals we set very generally, and topics that we consider in our strategic plan. Then I'll describe where our money comes from. We're an enterprise, or we're entirely funded by enterprise funds. That means customers pay us for services, solid waste, and water and sewer services on the utility bills that the city sends through the department to others. We set goals. Oh, we're on page 379 of your budget book. 388 of the PDF, if you're following along on the PDF version. I told you we'll summarize the goals. I'll tell you how we're funded, and then we'll get into the details of the operating and capital budget. So we have 7 LFR strategies that can best be summarized in 5 phrases: a safe and qualified workforce, good financial management, reliable service, complying with regulations, and environmental stewardship. A few highlights about what's going on with under each of those topics. Safe and qualified workforce has gotten a lot of attention from us in the last few years necessarily. Our employees weren't going home uninjured. We were at a 17% injury rate. Today we're at an 11% injury rate, and working hard to drop that farther, where we still remain above national averages for water and wastewater utilities. We also created a succession plan, recognizing as a part of long-range continuity planning that we lacked the ability to develop people, to replace people like me. About 35% of our workforce will be eligible for retirement in the next 10 years. That's not unusual, but concerning, particularly because of the number of leadership positions that are eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. So we implemented a program we called Utilities University that covers education from things like operator certification, that's a necessary part of water and wastewater operations, to classes in accountability and other management, leadership, communication skills, and things like that will be helpful as people develop their careers, and hopefully will want to stay with us. Good financial management. There are many, many standards that follow your financial management programs, but 2 that we're really proud of is your Credit ratings. Aqua has retained this year its Standard & Poor's AAA credit rating. We're at AA plus at Moody's. And OC was recently upgraded to AAA, which is very exciting.
I don't know, we should probably find out how many cities are in this category, because I think it's very few that have the solid waste utility, the water utilities, and then the general fund, or the city itself, all AAA rated. It's a short list.
One of the key ways we measure service reliability is with water line breaks and how long it takes us to repair them. That, for one thing, it's something that people notice. We have similar standards in the wastewater side, but in the recent dry weather, we've been more focused on water main breaks. As through the drought period, Eric mentioned that our main breaks increased greatly. They went up about 50% over the previous years. So in that time, we've been able to maintain a 4-hour average repair time from the time we get to the site till the time the water main repair is made. And we complete 70% of our water main breaks within 72 hours of notice. We go through a continuous prioritization program. If there's a big break, it gets the first attention. If there's a leak, people will know, and you will have received calls about the amount of time it takes to get to a leak, but generally about 72 hours overall for those repairs. We've also contracted for, and recognizing that we're in a serious drought, we contracted for emergency main repairs ahead of time to help us be ready for summer and the peak demands that typically come with our peak water demands in July and August. Finally, we've implemented a new telephone system for customers. Customers are now able to do more electronically with us, get more information about their bill without having to talk to a person. So that means that 24 hours a day instead of 10 hours a day weekdays, they're able to get additional information and do additional business with us by pushing buttons. They do also have their additional enhancements coming to the web page. We target regulatory compliance as 100% compliance with drinking water and treated wastewater standards at our water and wastewater plants, and we're running at about 100% this year. Finally, environmental stewardship is getting, of course, a lot of attention recently with our implementation of our water conservation program, a program that we're being assisted with through the OSU Extension Service. We're adding additional compressed natural gas facilities. This will only bring us to about 5% of our total fleet, but a substantial portion, more than 40% of all the vehicles we have that are eligible for CNG fueling, when the 6 additional vehicles arrive this summer, will be in operation for a total of 29, obviously. Finally, we also sell treated wastewater for reuse. And that's, not everyone does that. We run about 6 million gallons a day, over 2 billion gallons a year. And that's about 1/13 of all the treated wastewater that we produce every year. So it's a substantial portion. We're very excited to have that program and are working on a study that will help us grow the reuse program over time. We're going to talk about the budget now. First, before I get started telling you about our sources and uses of funds, I want to tell you the utilities' proposed operating budget is $97.5 million, 752 people. That's an increase of 7 positions over the previous year. This is a very small increase in budget. However, you need to know that last year our budget started out at $90 million, around $90 million. We've adjusted the budget up about $6.3 million in the past year to handle additional demands for water treatment, pumping, power costs for pumping and chemical costs, sludge disposal costs, adjusted our budget dramatically as we went through what we hope might be the last year of the drought. So this budget reflects our actual experience for the last 2 years. And the reason that changed that dramatically, historically we have budgeted a modest increase in total volume of water used, about 400 million gallons a year. It's been our typical budget increase, which is just a little bit over 1 million gallons a day. We've gone out through the drought from an average daily use of around 100 million gallons a day to 104 million gallons a day has been our range, up to 111 million gallons a day, 112 million gallons a day. So there's a significant budget impact there. You can see it in the water quality budget. Those are the people who treat our drinking water and pump it out. They run the Hefner plants, the lakes. They run the pipeline in from Atoka. So it's principally in addition to the water quality budget. I want to tell you briefly about the divisions, but we'll get to that after we talk about sources and uses of funds. We get our money from the Water Trust and the Environmental Assistance Trust. The two trusts combined have a total forecasted sources of funds of $298 million this year. $243 million of those funds come from service charges, those fees that we charge people on bills. $44.6 million will come from new debt service issued by the Water Trust. $10 million comes from other sources. Those include system development charges, and the solid waste side, it's flow fees, and several other lesser income items. That translates then into charges for each of the utilities. Water service charges are $114 million a year, solid waste $43.4 million, and wastewater charges $85.3 million. So the Water Trust is about 80% of this total program, 75% of the total program. Uses of funds is, we're showing you this again because they are slightly, of course, different. We're very proud that service contracts, those are operating contracts we use to supplement city staff, a total of $40 million, principally from OSEED. OSEED's $45 million income is about $25 million in annual contracts for waste management, for collection service, recycling, $5 million for landfill disposal contracts. Also, in solid waste are street sweeping and fleet maintenance are also privatized. City operations, you'll notice in this, our city operation total, while our budget is $97 million, the city operations total in your uses of funds is $93.2 million, and that's because we plan on using about 96% of our total operating budget in any year. Capital program is about a third of the total uses of funds at $102 million. Debt service total for the two utilities, water and solid waste, are $40.5 million. Moving on just to the Water Trust, it's about $249 million of the 200 of the larger number. Water operations, $82 million compared to $11.2 for solid waste. Debt service is the principal amount here at $39.4 million. The Veolia contracted wastewater service agreement is $14.2 million. And the capital program this year for water and sewer alone is $94.3 million. OSEED similar has a very small debt at $1.1 million. Their capital program, which we'll discuss briefly, is a total of $4.8 million. That includes a $3.7 million lease purchase agreement or lease type purchase agreement for the compressed natural gas fueling facilities we'll show you in the CIP. Again, service contracts are more than 50% of their total income, and solid waste operations just $11.2 million of OSEED's income. At last, the operating budget. So, largest division, again, is water quality. Wastewater quality are the people who manage the wastewater treatment plant operations agreement and also operate our 70 lift stations in town. Only 20 people and $2.7 million for wastewater quality. Solid waste, the folks you know, they're the people who collect trash in urban areas on the east side of the city and manage the various solid waste contracts, including bulky waste and landfill disposal. The line maintenance organization, those are the people who repair our 6,000 miles of pipe. It's the largest division by number of people. It's a very labor-intensive operation, and the second largest operating budget at $19.7 million. Engineering is smaller staff at 27 people and $2.6 million. Customer service, the people who answer the phones, read the water meters, are technically responsible for sending the bill, which is developed through an electronic process. They read the meters, we collect the data, ship it to an outside service provider who does bill print and mail for us at a cost of about $500,000 a year. Administration, just as Eric described for Public Works, includes a lot of expenses for our share of the organization's processing to make sure we get our employees' checks, make sure we get our bills paid. So it's the payroll, finance operations are very important to our overall functioning, or are a large part of the administration budget. In terms of the changes that we're making this year, we're consistent with our continuity plan. We're adding a water plant operator trainee so we can begin developing people. We've long hired operator trainees in lieu of full-time other operator title positions, formally adding a trainee location because we believe with startup of other training, we'll have folks in the market who can start in this job title and help us. We adjusted their power and chemical budgets again to match changes made in the 2012-2013 budget already. We expect to continue pumping as hard as we possibly can from Lake Atoka over the next year as we bring Lake Draper up to a more full level. It's still about 8 feet down from normal operations, 9 feet down, pardon me. In line maintenance, we're adjusting the amount of money we spend on repair parts and maintenance parts. We're adding 3 utility worker positions to line maintenance to better staff our response to OK locates. OK locates are the one-call dial before you dig. Council may remember that we've had a series of damage claims for other utilities where we have not been responding to our own OK locates. We've had some damage claims we would have liked to have assessed. Others weren't in the position to do so because we hadn't properly located. So it's a new program effort to decrease damages to our utility and increase our responsiveness to other utilities. In customer service, we added temporary positions in 2009 as we implemented the new billing system. That 4-year-old billing system is now getting better stabilized through some additional management work that's been done in the division. So we're eliminating 4 call center employees, those customer service representative positions that have been temporary for 4 years. We're adding a unit operations leader position on a temporary basis as we continue to make management changes in that part of our organization. This position will help us take information about calls and the electronic data that we get back from the new phone system. It helps us best staff the call center at various times of day to make certain we meet peak demand times better than we have in the past. And then finally, we're adding what's called a water service representative. Those are the folks who come out and turn on meters and help set up your account in the field, set the meter if necessary, respond to basic calls that are of an unknown origin that come in about the utility. So this is a change basically necessary because of the growth in the system. It's been 10 years since we've added a water service rep. And finally, in solid waste, we're making minor adjustments to their electric budget to help operate the CNG facility. In the engineering division, we're adding 2 positions. In administration, we're adding a database technician, and that's to manage the increased volume of work that those folks were doing, particularly to help us get ready for design of the second Atoka pipeline, the major capital investment that we face over the next few years. Again, department budget, $97.5 million. Very briefly in the CIP, we just have a few pictures to show you. CIP is about 1/3 of our total expenditures. We're working in most parts of the city. We're still working at the Draper Water Treatment Plant on a couple of projects. We're building pipelines this year further west to alleviate low pressure problems, including a $9 million pump station expansion in the southwest that will help deliver the water that we get pumped out to customers. We're making neighborhood repairs, a lot of sewer replacement projects, about $8 million, some water replacement projects, about $4 million, and then rehabilitation at most of our water treatment plants. At Lake Hefner, we have a 25 million gallon a day water treatment plant expansion project going on that takes the plant from 75 million to 100 million. We've built the pipes and get the water out of the plant already. These are pictures of the bottom pictures are of the Hefner plant expansion underway, and the top pictures of a pump station that's been undergoing rehabilitation. I'm really excited about this picture. This is the Lake Atoka overflowing as of Sunday. We're real pumped about that. And I thought it was a good picture. And then we're doing, as I mentioned, several pipeline projects are underway and more will be coming. We'll be making rehabilitation kinds of improvements for $5 million at the North Canadian wastewater treatment plant. It's our largest plant. We're building bringing the Chisholm Creek Interceptor up to the city of the Village and into the city of the Village. They are a large wastewater customer of ours. And again, building pipe renewal replacement projects. The Chisholm Creek wastewater treatment plant will change the way it disinfects wastewater with projects that will undergo this year. It will also, it and other plants will also enjoy some evasive odor improvements to help decrease the smell. A long time ago, I learned I can't say that wastewater treatment plants never smell, but there are things we can do to make it better, and this is one of them. In solid waste, we are completing the CNG fueling facility this summer, we think probably by August. The top picture is of the CNG storage devices coming into the site. They're there but not yet installed. We're building a small storage building at the solid waste facility to help them manage their carts and their repair parts for carts. Biggest part of their capital project every year is rolling stock at about $2 million, and Big Blue carts and bins cost us another $1 million typically. I would be happy to answer questions of any kind.
I have a question. What parts of the city are we adding a pipeline into?
Primarily to the southwest. We're doing repair pieces. Let's look at the map. So blue blobs, best way to describe it, are neighborhoods that are getting water replacement projects. Red blobs are sewer replacement projects, if that helps. We're also building, there are a couple of things that are not on the map because they're almost complete. One is a pipeline going west along northwest, or east along northwest 120, I'm nervous, sorry. A pipeline going east along northeast 122nd that helps improve water pressure going out to Kelly Avenue, coming from further west to help get better water pressure up to that area that's near the turnpike to the northeast. And that's been a chronic area. The big pipes are going in far southwest again, answering the growth along the Reno corridor, particularly, but where we've had very low pressure in the last 3 years as we've hit peak demands every summer.
But heavy, the weakness in the system for delivery has been that far west area.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
You've got plans in place and have had over the last several years, and each phase of it make it a little bit better out there. But that's where the weakness part of the system is, to the pact where we've had some lower pressure than we really should have.
Yes, we've responded with small temporary pump stations and ways to ameliorate to make things better for folks, but this pipeline is the real meat on the bones for fixing that problem and being able to open that corridor up where we already have wastewater treatment capacity and are holding people up at this time for lack of good water supply. The pipes, if you can picture, have come from the Draper plant down at Douglas Boulevard and Southeast 149th Street in the lower right-hand corner of your map, all the way across town, and most recently up Portland. So we've come a long way, but it's a long way out there, and we're very excited to have this reinforcement of other pipes and again to get good quality pressure and flow out there over the next 2 years.
Your Honor, just a question. Marcia, on the 29 CNG vehicles you're soon to have, what percentage of your total fleet is that?
It's about 5%.
And second question is, when is the CNG facility going to be finished?
We think August. I had an earlier date, but we think August is probably real.
This fall. Thank you.
Okay. David?
Marcia, just a question on water pressure. In terms of some of the older neighborhoods, I'm thinking in terms of South Oklahoma City, south of, say, 15th Street, going forward down to, say, 29th Street. If a home is experiencing low water pressure, is it normally something within that homeowner's plumbing system that's limiting the water pressure, or could it be the water line itself impacting?
It can be the water line itself. It can be personal plumbing. I've had that experience myself with a drip that decreased pressure, but we always want customers to call us. So if they're seeing a low pressure, if they think it's lower than normal, for any reason, and pressure does vary seasonally depending upon how far you are from the water treatment plant, because those plant pressures go up and down about 10 psi, 10 pounds seasonally as well. So always happy to have a customer call and let us check it out.
Okay.
It can be a big leak that you don't know about. It can be a leak that doesn't surface. We'd rather go look
Great, thank
and
you.
have people
But
be
generally, in
frustrated.
that part of town, there are not system issues. So I mean, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be a leak or there can be a closed valve from time to time. But generally, that's not a system issue for water
Agreed.
pressure in that part of town.
Agreed.
Ed?
It seems like week after week in zoning, we see how closely water seems to be correlated with development or tied to development. We have impact fees, I understand, for water. That's one of the only impact fees we have. When were those rates established? And
Under Councilman White was the chair of the Water Trust in the 1980s, as I understand that.
So they were established in 1986. They haven't been raised in roughly 30 years.
25 years, yeah, anyway. We're undergoing a cost of service study. We have the opportunity to look at some of those fees and charges as a part of an overall cost of service study for the water utility. We haven't done one since the late 1990s. That work, the Water Trust will see the consultant for the first time, I hope, at their next meeting, June the 18th, for some background information.
Can you summarize the situations in which a citizen would have a different rate or level of service depending on where they live? In terms of waste or water or anything?
Rates are all the same. Wholesale customers pay different rates. For wholesale customers, that is the city of Piedmont, for example, where we treat some of their wastewater and deliver some of their drinking water to them for distribution. So we have 14 to 19 wholesale customers in various pieces and parts. Their rates are different, and their rates are structured based on the way they use the service that we provide for them. They have options. All of our drinking water customers pay the same. If you're a retail customer in Oklahoma City, you say that pay the same price no matter where you are. Your meter charge would vary. If you have a bigger meter, a standard house meter is called a 5/8 by 3/4 inch size. That pays a flat rate, which I think is $10.55 right now, plus $2.55 1,000 gallons for the use that for the water they consume through the meter.
But solid waste doesn't have the same level of service.
Solid waste has differential levels of service, but urban versus rural, but the same price. So,
And Marcia, where is that line that separates urban versus rural?
You can qualify, maybe this is not going to sound like a direct answer, but first I can get you a map. I'd be happy to get that for you. Urban there are 25 households in the neighborhood. It's attached near other solid waste urban collection. As a new neighborhood comes in, they can apply for transition from rural to urban and be granted that. That's a process that the solid waste manager handles for us. We transition about 1,000 houses a year. Typically, there are about 13,000 houses that are rural customers. So,
But we have criteria, and we can provide that criteria to you is what that is. But it's basically a function of density and how close it is to the inner core.
I mean, surely the cost of delivering per capita is not the same in different parts of the city, and yet we charge the same for everyone. Have we ever looked at trying to equilibrate that?
On water and wastewater?
On either one, water or waste.
yeah, well, in water, we have the ability to do that through the cost of service study. We have not yet started a cost of service study for solid waste. We can't tell you experientially that because this is a very big concern for customers in rural areas. They want the same services that we provide in urban areas, and so rural customers have to put their bags inside a Big Blue. They can't leave those bags at the curb, and they don't get curbside recycling. They have monthly bulky, just like urban customers. All of the things are the same, but those are two pretty big differences as far as our rural customers are concerned. However, at the same time, it costs us about twice as much to deliver the rural service, which is something we contract to Waste Management for. Then it does the urban service, including curbside recycling. So the costs are very different. Historically, council chose to provide everyone the same price for service, and the policy reason for that is to help keep trash out of our neighborhoods.
But on water and wastewater, that's typically not done. Generally, the utility basis, it's a uniform rate across the boundaries of the utility, generally on water and wastewater. One of the things that the Water Utilities Trust, Marcia and Brett are looking at is to changing the rate structure on water to have a potential increasing block rates, so that the more water you would use, the more you'd pay for in the future. So that's a concept that's being evaluated right now.
The cost of service study will give you an indication, maybe for the first time, of what it's costing to deliver to different parts of the city? Or is that
That's not part of the scope that they're looking at, I don't think.
Not to that level of detail, no. That would be an add-on to the, we haven't pursued that at all with the contractor in terms of pricing and what that might mean. Typically where that's done is that there are very specific improvements isolated to an area. It's more common in the sewer utility than in the water. I've seen it in water utilities where you have pressure levels. The Bay Area in California comes to mind as a place where we've seen increasing rates, but they're going up 2,000 feet in elevation, and so they're charging people essentially for the power costs to go up those incrementally, to go up through those phases of pumping.
But that's essentially not a mission of the
It's very,
as we are.
it tends to be the exception rather than the rule, but it's technology that's out there.
A short-term, more practical solution to that is impact fees, I think. The idea that we should not have impact fees in areas where we're now spending millions of dollars trying to raise that water pressure because they were outside of our delivery area. And James, you have some in your area, and Larry's got several lots in his area. Those were outside of our normal delivery area. And the idea that all of us should bear the cost of that, to me, is wrong. I mean, it should be, we should have impact fees, and as people come onto the system, then the money would accumulate, and that's how you would defray it. But you bring up impact. I have to tell a story. I know we're in a hurry to get out of here, but I have to tell a story. In 1986, Jerry Gilbert, who had one vote and literally only had one vote, could never get anybody else to vote with him, had this idea about impact fees. And he preached it, and I looked at it, and I thought, that's really a great idea. So I put the votes together to try to get an impact fee passed. At the end, I had barely had 5 votes. The homeowners the home builders and all the people, the commercial builders, they didn't like it because it's going to cost more to build a building. But I got to 5, counting Jerry. We got ready to vote, and he came to me that day and said, I can't vote for it. It was his idea. He's the one that put the whole thing. I put it together, and he wouldn't vote for it. He said, and so I got it continued. But I asked him later, I said, why wouldn't you vote for it, Jerry? And he said, it's not high enough, and you'll never come back and do it again. And sure enough, he was right about that. It wasn't high enough. We never came back and readdressed it. He still should have voted for it, but it's something I've always remembered, both about him, but he's probably watching today. I remember that both because it was his idea and then he didn't vote for it, but also that he was right, that it wasn't high enough, and we have never readdressed it other than in conversations like this. And I think it's time that we do. And whatever the heat we'd have to take to do that, we ought to take it, because it's just inequitable to dump the amount of money that the Water Trust has to put into expanding service for pressure to areas that the system wasn't designed to do. And it's not fair to the people that have paid for their system to continue to have to pay to expand it. So,
Can I give just a little bit of history on the impact fees? We've got a couple of new councilmen that maybe haven't been through that a little bit, but impact fees have been talked about over the last several years. And we did have a movement to increase impact fees a few years ago, which would be water and sewer, also for transportation and for parks, to have a process. And we were moving forward with it, and it's about the time that the economy went really bad in 08. The real estate market went down, and so it was kind of tabled at that time, and it hasn't been brought back at that point. But that was discussed at that point, to have an increase to water and wastewater at that point, but because of the downturn in the economy, we chose not to pursue it at that time and have not brought it back since.
Larry?
Jim, let me ask you a question, and see, straighten me out on this. We do not have impact fees right now on water.
No, we do.
Well, what I was going to say is, if I wanted to put in a new subdivision in an area where there was no water, I, as the developer, would have to fund entirely getting the water to that property.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
But you're going to pay an impact fee to the system also. There's an impact fee of about
So there's an impact fee
of about $100 per house to tie into the system then.
I didn't realize that.
You have to put in all the water in sewer lines.
And the sewer lines.
And then we still charge you about $100 a house.
But I am paying for that, for that service, to get that in there through paying for the sewer lines and for the water lines to get in there.
Yeah, we require the developer to pay for the water.
And that is done across the board, whether it's in far southwestern Oklahoma City or far southeastern Oklahoma City or even up northwest. That's across the board.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. But you're not paying to get the water pressure up.
Yeah, but
That's being paid.
Now, it's not quite done across the board. It's not done in southeast Oklahoma City because we don't have sewer lines. So that's a non-starter in southeast Oklahoma City. It's not done in southwest Oklahoma City unless you're very close to that transmission line that comes west out of the plant. So it's not done all over the city because most of my area, percentage-wise, is not served by either water or sewer. So there was no impact fee.
Well, it's not practically available in those areas.
Right, but the key is this. The fee itself is so small, if you cannot equate bringing the water to it in a pipe with the total cost of treating the water and maintaining the system. It's just far out of proportion. So that $100 or so that's paid now in the impact fee is a drop in the bucket, literally, to what it costs the city to move that water, treat that sewage. It's just not, there's no equity in the cost at all.
So can I just ask you, as a policy, why you would rely just on impact fees then as opposed to a rate adjustment?
I wouldn't do that. I'd be open to all of it, but I think basically the impact fee is the most equitable, quickest way to get to it, because I think that impacts everybody. The impact fee takes money from the new business, puts it into the system to defray the cost on everybody else of providing a service. And I think the other is more complicated. I'm not opposed to that. I just think the impact fee is much more direct. It goes directly to the water faucet that is creating the problem.
More comments or questions over here? All right, Marcia, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chief Bryant is here this morning to give us our last budget presentation.
Well, good morning, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to present our proposed 2013-2014 Fire Department budget. As we get set up, I'd point out to you that in your budget books, our section begins on page 173. And also, as we get started this morning, I have members of my staff here that I'd like to introduce to you. Our Deputy Chief of Operations, Chief Cecil Clay. Our Deputy Chief of Support Services Division, Chief Mark Woodard. And representing Fire Prevention Services Division this morning, Chief Sawyers is out of town, and so I think they tripled up to replace her this morning, obviously. But we have our Battalion Chief Holman Jones, who's over our Fire Investigations Work Section, Chief Harold Thompson, Battalion Chief Harold Thompson, who's over our Code Enforcement Work Section, and somewhat newly promoted District Chief Kevin Berry, who's our Public Education Chief. So appreciate them being here with me this morning to go over our budget. And also our business manager for the fire department running the program this morning, Clint Regier. The mission of the Oklahoma City Fire Department is to provide emergency response, fire prevention, and public education services to the Oklahoma City community so that our citizens can have their lives and property protected. Our major departmental issues, obviously reducing fire fatalities and property loss, and that we know that sometimes because of a lack of awareness and/or application of personal safety measures by our residents, those result in fires, fire fatalities, injuries as far as emergency medical, part of what we do, and property loss. A strategic result to address the issue of fire fatalities is that by 2015, each year the structure fire fatality rate in Oklahoma City will be at or below the national average, which is 1.05 per 100,000 residents, and that's based on data that we get from across the country from the National Fire Protection Association. In 2012, that was at 1.08, so we were right on target there, and the estimate for this year is not very good, as you can see, 2.7, and that's through April. If we can go the rest of the year without any fatalities through 1st of July, then that will probably drop below 2. And obviously the target for 2014 would be that 1.05 rate. If we go to the next slide, it kind of gives you a little bit better perspective of how this can kind of change from year to year. And it doesn't take very many fatalities to spike our fire fatality rate per 100,000 residents. I can tell you this year, especially in December, was not a good month. We had a total of 6 fatalities here in the city. 4 of those were in a single structure. And obviously most of these are in residential structures. And in almost every case of a fire fatality in a residential structure, there was no working smoke alarm. So that's why we continue through our public education work section and also our personnel that are out in the field at the stations, that we continue to make sure that smoke alarms are available at no cost to our citizens. We'll install those. We replace batteries. We were even funded for a grant, and we put together Project Life that in the core area of the city where we were seeing a lot of these fatalities in the past few years, that we're installing a 10-year lithium battery smoke alarm, so that's a little less maintenance on those, and hopefully they last longer. But that's, you know, we don't like to see that, and we continue to try and educate the public and make sure that at the very minimum that they're protected by a smoke alarm.
Chief, may I ask specifically about that program? Do we have Spanish language materials and you know, marketing materials and officers that can help distribute those in some of the
Yes, ma'am, all of that. We make sure that we are able to communicate. Some of our firefighters are bilingual, and so we make sure that they're involved in that program, and we do print those materials in Spanish.
Great. Some of those near South neighborhoods that Pete and I share are seriously impacted by this, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Another strategic result to address fire fatalities, that by 2015, the community of Oklahoma City will benefit from a comprehensive fire safety and prevention education, as evidenced by 90% of our second grade students in the Oklahoma City limits attending the safety trailer presentations per year. This is the group or the age group that we target every year, and again, it's the Oklahoma City limits, so that would take in other school systems as well, Putman City, so forth. And we try and get to every second grader with that safety trailer, which is basically a large trailer, which is a mock-up of a residential home. We take them through the trailer and show them some of the hazards that are in their home and how to deal with fires that may start in the kitchen, how to get out of a home if the smoke alarm goes off. And so, again, we push that out to quite a few young children. And 30% of our inspections, permits, and licenses in compliance with fire codes and ordinances at the time of initial inspection. So again, that's the work of our code enforcement work section. And 31% of our Oklahoma City citizens reach through non-emergency public contacts. You know, we have a lot of programs, and they go across the board as far as age groups and demographics for fire prevention and fire safety education. We for example, have a senior citizen safety seminar that we do in conjunction with OSU OKC every year, that we're a part of that. And some of you have hosted the Wildland Safety Program meetings that we put on in your wards. So again, we try and get that message out there, and again, it's to make sure that we cut down on fire fatalities, increase property loss, those issues. Another one of our department issues is increased service demand, and that population growth and demographic changes, development coupled with changing demographics will lead to a growing demand on fire department services and resources. And if we don't address those could result in increased response time, leading to increased property loss and deterioration of patient condition on EMS incidents, and increased delays in delivering other services. I want to point out, and this is something that we dealt with last summer that you're familiar with, the council passed a resolution that we would only respond to the more higher priority medical calls. We've implemented that. We've also implemented the CAD-to-CAD or computer-aided dispatch interface with IMSA. And so if you can see by this graph here, that top line, that's what the number of emergency medical incidents that IMSA is projected to respond to this year. That's the rate that they're going at. And as you know, before we went to the interface, we were responding on all those. So we would have responded to that same number. The middle line is the number of incidents that we responded to in 2012. So you can see we would have had a substantial increase, which we were seeing that every year anyway. The bottom line is the total incidents that emergency medical incidents that fires responded to this year. So we reduced the total call volume to about 30%, which is what we estimated it would be. I think the benefit, obviously, that we get out of that is less wear and tear on our personnel, less wear and tear on our equipment, lower fuel cost. So there's some very good benefit to that. There's some other issues that we'll get to later that go along with that. But so it's had the impact that we believed it would. And with reduced call volume, I think that's going to help us maintain our response time targets better. Another one of our issues is emergency medical services, that we continue to take a more prominent role and an increasing role in emergency medical delivery, which will require additional resources to provide advanced emergency medical care to all citizens. So we continue to work through our Advanced Life Support Initiative as directed by Council. We're currently 29 of our 36 engines are at the ALS level. And so as we continue to hire paramedics through our hiring process, as we continue to train some of our incumbent personnel to the paramedic level, we will put additional ALS engines in service. One of our strategic results along those lines is that by 2015, the citizens of Oklahoma City, anticipating growth in the outlying areas, will still receive emergency response within 6 minutes, 70% of the time, in order to protect lives, assess and treat medical emergencies, and limit damage to property and the environment. As you can see there in 2012, our actual number there was 73%, so we met that target very well. 2013 estimate is 64%, and obviously our target in 14 is 70%. That 70% is a national standard. It's out there right now. It goes along with the NFPA 1710 standard. I can tell you we're not the only department that's a challenge to meet that. And I think we're still somewhat unique from some of those other departments, and that we have this large geographic area to address, and so that's part of that. Obviously, one of the ways we're addressing that issue is the addition of 3 stations that was approved by the voters in the 2007 bond issue. One of those is under construction right now at Southwest 119th and Rockwell. Also, one of our issues is disaster preparedness, and that the growing requirements of disaster prevention, response, and recovery, coupled with the uncertainty of future Homeland Security funding, could negatively impact existing services. Obviously, here of late, You've seen some of those assets and resources be deployed to the storms that we've had. We're fortunate that some of that is they're regional assets, meaning that they can actually and are expected to respond outside the city limits of Oklahoma City. That's how they were funded, and that was the understanding when they were funded. But we house those here in the city, we maintain those here in the city, and so that's the benefit that we get out of them. Some of these assets are our own for the city here, and so we're very well equipped in that way, and we've done some, we've been very successful in getting some of this equipment and resources here. But again, there's some uncertainty and some concern that although those were funded initially through federal grants, that a lot of that's going away, it's being reduced. We're no longer an urban area security initiative region as we once were, so some of that funding is about to go away. And so the challenge and the concern will be to sustain those. And we'll just have to keep our eye on that as far as what funding we may get to sustain those resources and assets.
Chief, it might be a good
Yes,
time to tell them about your mobile command post.
I think after we're concluded here today, we have a mobile command post that's going to be set up out here next to Bicentennial Park. This is a joint police and fire command post. We've historically had our own vehicles. Now we usually have co-located those at our command post, but we function out of each one separately. What you'll see out there today is very state-of-the-art and modern, but it's combined, so we can actually operate together. We have basically two different sections that we can operate of, but you can open it up, and it's going to be very well equipped. And we've both departments, police and fire, have outgrown the individual ones that we have, and so this will be a very great improvement over what we've been able to do, that this is joint. And so certainly appreciate Chief City working with us on this project to make it a joint venture, and I think it's going to further enhance our capabilities in these incidents in the future.
It's not fully functional yet. The people are still putting communication gear in it and some IT equipment in it, but it's a pretty impressive facility. So after the meeting, we'll go on.
We got delivery on it just days after the May 20th storm. And so it arrived in the city, and now we need to, again, get it equipped and everything, but that should take place very quickly, and it'll be available for responses. So I think you're going to be impressed with that.
David?
Mayor, just a comment again, Chief, thanks again for all of yours and your staff's work during the tornadoes. And I gained so much additional information about the various departments that are within your division, such as the inspection group that not only inspects businesses but goes into schools, and not only checking on the issues that you might normally think, such as sprinkler systems and things like that, but now they're looking at their overall emergency plans and walking through those plans with the various administrators, whether it's a storm like we encounter, or a fire, or unfortunately now these intruders into schools. And then there's the urban search and rescue group. Just all the groups really do a very, very critically important job, and it's unfortunate more people don't understand how important the roles you all play within the overall protection of our citizens.
Well, obviously, the response side of things is what is very visible during these times, but a lot of people don't realize, and it's not as visible, a lot of the prevention efforts that go in beforehand, and a lot of the preparedness programs that we do have to make sure that people are as well protected prior to the event as we can. And so a lot of work goes into that, and again, it's a smaller staff of people, so the work that they're able to do in those efforts is amazing to me.
Okay.
Another one of our issues is the age and condition of our facilities. A growing number of our fire department facilities do not meet the needs of a modern fire service, which will result in increased facility maintenance costs and a diversion of resources from direct services to the public. The average age of our fire stations is about 32 years old right now. We have two, Station 17 and Station 21, that are 62 years old. The good news there is Station 21 is one of the stations that was part of the 2007 bond issue that we will be replacing in the next few years. So 18 or over half of our stations are 35 years or older. And so we've got some needs there. And we're not saying that we're going to necessarily request or go out for any funding for that, but we want to be able to be smart about it and prioritize the needs of all these facilities. So to address this issue, we are going to go out for an RFP for a consultant to come in and do an assessment of all of our facilities, and that way we can prioritize those for the future and how we address those so we can do it in the most efficient and smart way. And again, we're currently putting together that RFP. And we added, again, $150,000 to the budget from the fire sales tax. So this is not additional funding that we're requesting for this. We had that in our fire sales tax fund. As far as our major budget changes, again, and all of these I want to say that you see up there are from the fire sales tax fund. So we didn't request any additional funding in this year's or the upcoming year's budget. So the construction of Fire Station 26 that I mentioned earlier, that construction is ongoing right now at Southwest 119th and Rockwell. We add an additional $1.2 million for that project. And again, that's up and underway. The estimated completion is March of next year. So we're well underway with that. The new fuel system, we're probably the only department left in the city that tracks all of our fuel usage and delivery by paper. So we're going to put more of an automated system in that when the firefighters fuel their vehicles and so forth, it's more of a card system that automatically counts the amount of fuel that was used and so forth. We think that system is estimated to cost about $350,000, but what we'll actually do is we'll be able to reallocate one of our positions, civilian positions at the maintenance facility to do other things for us because that's a lot of the work that that position does. And as I just mentioned earlier, the fire facilities assessment, $150,000. Just to bring you up to date, a few years ago, we applied for and received a SAFER grant to basically maintain 29 positions. And those are moving over to the general fund now. So that grant, the terms of that grant have expired. So, and obviously we're able to do that now. I want to briefly go over the lines of business and programs within the fire department. The organizational chart that you see here is a little bit more detailed than the one you have in your budget book, but basically you see the divisions of the department: administrative, fire prevention services, support services, and the operations division, and the number of employees in each of those divisions. The administration line of business, 2014 proposed budget is $10.9 million, and this is broken up into business services and executive leadership. We'll point out that almost $6 million of the business services budget is chargebacks, including $2.6 million for IT services and a little over $3 million for risk management chargebacks. Fire prevention services, the proposed budget for next year is $4.8 million. And again, the work sections within that division are fire investigations, inspection and code enforcement or code compliance, and public safety education. Some facts under leading for results of that division: that 36% of arson cases were referred to the district attorney's office for prosecution. The target is 37%, and again, that's a national average that we try to adhere to. We've processed over 10,000 requests for service and code compliance, and that's everything from permits, the burn permits that people get out in the rural areas and so forth, to special event permits, and then obviously building inspections. And we've distributed over 1,400 smoke alarms this current year. Under the support services line of business, the proposed budget's $10 million, and that's broken down into the fire dispatch work section and our maintenance section, which is at both vehicles and facilities. Some of the data from that line of business, 73% of our incidents are dispatched in less than a minute. The target is 90. You see there that next bullet, 97% of incidents were dispatched in less than a minute in fiscal year 2012. I wanted to point that out and make you aware that goes back to the CAD-to-CAD interface with IMSA. Now that we're doing, it takes a little bit more time. We have to allow IMSA to process and prioritize those calls to determine the ones that we are going to respond on and the lower priority calls that we're no longer responding to. So that's the difference there. And we dispatched currently for the current year 72,000 incidents.
Chief, if that measurement is 1 minute, what would it be in real, I mean, is it now 2 minutes or is it 5 minutes? What's the?
When we first implemented the CAD-to-CAD, with any new program of that nature, there were some things to work through. So it was longer at first, maybe more along the 2-minute time frame, and we've made some improvements, or IMSA's made some improvements in their processing time since then, and we continue to work on that. So it ranges from about 1 to 2 minutes additional time.
So if we're missing it, we're missing it by, a fraction of a minute perhaps, rather than 5 minutes.
Correct. Okay. It's not anywhere close to the 5 minutes. Great. Like I say, mostly the additional time is the 1 to 2 minute range.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. On the maintenance side, under leading for results, 90% of our frontline apparatus are available, which is pretty good considering our target's 70% there. We've completed approximately 1,600 fleet work orders in the current fiscal year and completed approximately 700 facility work orders in the current year. Under operational services, proposed budget is $104 million. Obviously, that's the largest division in the department as far as number of personnel. It's broken down into emergency medical services, $70 million, fire suppression at $12 million, and operations training at $22 million. Under that division, we respond to fire incidents in 5 minutes. 54% of the time, the target is 70. I said earlier, obviously, that we want to do that in a total of 6 minutes. That's broken down into the 1 minute for dispatch time, 5 minutes for the response. So that's the difference there. I think the fact that we've done the CAD-to-CAD interface, which has lessened our overall call volume, and with the addition of the 3 stations that we're putting in the outlying areas, that we will continue to improve on that measure and do our best to ensure that that response time is within the desired target. 69% of structure fires contained to room of origin. The target is 65. That's an important measure for us because that speaks to property loss, and there's an economic impact as far as property loss. So we're doing very well in that area. We responded to 3,400 fire-related responses and 900 special operations responses, which would include hazardous material, technical rescue, dive operations, things of that nature. And with that, I want to express my appreciation for the continued support that we receive from council. And I wanted to maybe echo Councilman Greenwell's comments about the level of cooperation that we've seen here between all the city departments. And again, the unified command that we had set up is a great example of how all the departments come together and work well together and coordinate the efforts to make sure that we deliver the best response and services that we possibly can. Appreciate your support and all that, and especially, and we're always reminded during these times of the tremendous level of support we get from our citizens during these times. It's amazing, and I'm tickled to death to work in Oklahoma City for that very reason. So with that, I appreciate everything that you do for us and the support that we get from the council, and glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Chief, your call numbers being down because of the adjustment in policy on when you go out, how does that translate into savings on a capital side?
Well, we're still looking at that. I will have some figures for that. We're not a full year into it yet, Mayor, so I think that's kind of the time frame that we were looking at to kind of get as much data as we could and maybe have a little bit better idea of what exactly we're looking at, though.
But it's possible that our replacement schedule could change?
Possible. Again, that's just something that we'll, as we collect the data on that and see if our maintenance costs we're seeing are decreasing because of that, then obviously that's something that we could consider.
Okay. Pat?
Chief, you all do a great job. I had a comment the other day. Everybody likes the firemen. That doesn't hold true with our police officers occasionally. A question on the smoke detectors. You had a figure of 1,400 in here?
Yes, sir.
Is that the actual number, or is that a target?
No, that's how many we actually distributed over. And we have, it's two different programs. We had the Project Life program, which we received grant funding for. That was specifically for the 10-year lithium battery alarms. Ordinarily, and day in and day out, we have an ongoing program for just the 9-volt battery powered smoke alarms. And so all of our stations have a cache of those. Public education keeps us supplied with that. We receive a lot of those as donations from the big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's and those companies. The Kidde Corporation that manufactures smoke alarms has donated some as well. So again, we have tons of them. And there is absolutely no reason that there should be any resident that doesn't have a working smoke alarm in their home. A lot of the problem that we run into, though, is we will go out, we'll put one in, or they'll get one and put one in, and they won't maintain it. And we've seen that as a problem. So,
do you have any kind of regular program to inspect them, make sure the batteries are?
Well, I don't know if we'd call it a program, but our firefighters out in the field have become very good at when they go into somebody's home, say on an emergency medical call, and they've dealt with the emergency at hand, they may take a look around. They may even ask, can we test your smoke alarm while we're here? So we try and keep up with them as best we can. This past year, we've also had a program aimed specifically at apartment complexes to work with the management of those complexes and ensure that we go through there and make sure that there's a working smoke alarm in each apartment.
Do you have any estimate of the percentage of Oklahoma City facilities that have working smoke detectors?
Well, most of them have security systems that include a fire alarm system. So there's detection systems in there, including smoke alarms that are hardwired into the structure and go to a central panel.
About what percentage of our homes have that?
Excuse me?
Do you have any feel for what percentage of our residential facilities have a smoking alarm?
You know, I know that's something that we poll in our citizen survey every year. Doug, can you recall that right off?
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Larry?
Two attaboys and one question, Chief. The support that the fire department gave Ward 3 on Friday night into Saturday morning on flood control and everything was just outstanding, and the rescues that were done and the lives that I think were saved. Also the compassion. I know other than Chief Woodard, there were other people involved in that tragic situation that emanated in Ward 3 with the Deep Fork search, and the compassion and the diligence that was showed there was just outstanding, and I want to congratulate all the men and women that were involved in that. You mentioned on the IMSA side that we had saved on a number of calls. Do we have any evidence yet, Jim? I have not heard anybody bring up any situation where a life was lost or a health care issue was not looked at properly with the new transition. Do we have any statistics on that? Are we?
I'm not aware of any instances, but I don't know if we have any instances.
There have been some cases where a higher priority call that we should have been prompted on we weren't prompted. Now, I say that, we still see all the calls coming over to our dispatch screen. The only difference is that when IMSA puts the appropriate priority on that, that incident changes color on our screen, which is basically our prompt. There's been some times that didn't occur, but those were, to be expected, I think. And again, the transition of going to this new system. And so, and most of those, like I say, our dispatchers will catch it. And additionally, if it's obvious higher priority call, we don't wait. We go ahead and dispatch it before we get that prompt, because we know by the nature of the call that we're going to respond to it anyway.
So our service to our residents who are out there needing the support, that's been pretty transparent, the change?
It's really hard to quantify at that point in time. Obviously, there are less responders, but there are less responders in the areas where we don't think we should be responding anymore, for the most part.
Okay.
What happens, so the agreement that we've come with IMSA is that if it's not a level 1 priority call, then we're not going on that anymore. What happens, though, if IMSA is at level 0? In other words, they don't have any ambulance that can go, and a call comes in that's not a level 1.
There have been some times that's occurred over the last few months that they've made us aware of that, and so we'll pick up the slack during those times and kind of go back to the way we were doing things. But those are temporary type situations. They don't last like a full day. It may be just a matter of hours or so while that's going on, and while they're making staffing adjustments that might occur.
But are we documenting how many times they're at level 0? And so, in other words, the public's not seeing any change because fire is picking up the slack and going in their place. So are we documenting how many times that's happening?
Yes, we know how many times it's occurred.
I mean, our fire vehicles, my understanding, get 1 mile to the gallon. So to go to some of the costs, I mean, every time we send out a vehicle, there's a cost to that. Have we looked at, or I don't know, because I know Tulsa doesn't go on anything other than level 1. Is there, now that we've issued an RFP and we're talking about a new contract with a provider, have we looked at ways that the city might be reimbursed when fire is picking up the slack, so to speak, and going when that provider is not able to send an ambulance because there's no ambulance available?
We're not currently looking at anything like that, but that's certainly something we could.
It's a bit of a zero gain for us because we're supplementing IMSA. I mean, so if IMSA has to pay the fire department, then it's an additional cost to IMSA, and then we reimburse that in a larger amount.
Right.
So I'm not sure that there's a net gain to us by participating in that process.
So we spend $70 million on emergency medical services and $12 million on fire suppression. It's roughly 6 times more. Is that historically, has that been about 6 times more, or is that changing?
Well, the number that we generally report is that around, and it varies, but anywhere from 80 to about 85% of our total call volume is emergency medical related. So that's why you see those budgeted amounts in those proportions.
All right. Is everybody accounted for from the Friday's tornado, or are we still?
No, sir. We still have, I think, one from the incident that Councilman McAtee spoke about, and then we did make a recovery this morning on the Oklahoma River, so there's 3 that are unaccounted for in that incident.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Chief? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, are we ready to adjourn the Finance Committee? Any other comments or questions before we go? All right, Finance Committee is adjourned. We'll reconvene the council meeting with items from council. Does anyone have anything? All right. I know we appreciate our citizens' patience with the weather this year, and certainly we want to thank, for the 2nd week in a row, our public safety people for doing such a great job Friday and Saturday in extraordinarily difficult situations. So please pass that along to your coworkers, and we are adjourned.